It's a great honor to be a part of this thought-provoking summit today. We take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to all our summit partners, request to cheer up for all our partners, dear friends. So I want all of you, please put your hands together for our partners, our open network partners, Sahamati, our knowledge partner, McKinsey and Company, our panel partners, Oliver Wyman and EY, event partner, Dun and Bradstreet. Before we proceed further, may we remind our guests to share their views, opinion, and experiences on their social media accounts. Please use hashtag as well, along with your posts. And with this, I would like to invite Mr. Rajesh Bansal, CEO, Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, to share his knowledge on financial services. Can we give him a huge round of applause, everyone?
Thank you very much. So I know it's been a rush afternoon and for all of us, so I'll be quick and brief. Some of us we have interacted, but a lot of you may not know who we are. But I'll not make it a RBS session. So first of all, thanks to Koshi and everyone for having me here. So I'm sure you heard some pieces of it, but in our context, in financial sector context, I wanted to bring it up as a focus thing. You know, some of us are old enough. Go back to 2009-10. I'm sure Pawan and others who've been so closely involved. We are a country which digital was for the rich. It's not 20 years ago, it's about just 14 years ago, a country which was known as, a developing country, a poor country. In 13, 14 years, where have we achieved? What have we achieved in terms of digital? That at G20, the developed countries look at us. And as you know what we have achieved, and I'll come to how it can be leveraged for financial sector, is obviously, a digital ID, 1.4 billion people can prove who they are at the flip of an OTP or a fingerprint or iris. We built obviously the world's best digital payment rails. We are all aware of that. We have built the open finance architecture of account aggregator. Now we have built the world's best or the most open e-commerce architecture we are building with ONDC. Coupled with that, the fact that India is one of the lowest data rates in the world, as the Honorable Minister also said, I think if I remember it's 0.09 cents per GB, and increased smartphone ownership. Coupled with a demographic dividend in terms of digital natives. In my office, they're all digital natives. If you ask them to write a check, I'm sure some of you, who are below 25 will not know how to write a check, most of you. And I remember a friends calling me to saying, my son is asking, मेरे को check मिला है company से, उसका क्या करना है? That is true, right? Ask a 20-year-old, they don't know what to do with a check. So digital natives, UPI natives as I will call it, in terms of payment, digital natives. All of that exists, e-sign exists, DigiLocker exists, open architectures exist in terms of account aggregator. Have we really impacted the lives of 1 billion people? If you ask yourself in this room, yes, we have. Your life is easy, my life is easy. We can get an instant PAN, we can get an instant demat account, you can do so many things instantly. But has it really impacted everyone? Potentially, no. And our work, we are as a wholly owned subsidiary of RBI, we were set up about 2 years ago. We realized that digital stack of India is benefiting people, but is not benefiting the 600 million people. And it seems to be unevenly favoring you and me. Yes, we can say that they are getting their DBT in their bank account and the government is saving billions of dollars. Yes, to that extent. Today they can go to a micro ATM, which were only 20,000. Pawan, if I remember the number 2009-10, 20,000. Now 2 million micro ATMs, interoperable, where they can go and withdraw their money. But I'll give you an example of where the friction is and why we are closely now, I mean, you have that right trio of people with NPCI, ONDC and us working together, that just try and map the journey of a farmer to get a loan of 1 lakh rupees. Try and map the journey of a Amul dairy farmer to get a loan to buy a new cow. We asked ourselves this question that India has everything. So that shouldn't be a problem, right? It should be digital. I'm sure most of us think like that, right? Sorry to say, most of our banker friends also think like that. They said there is no problem in farm loan, in a cattle loan, or a micro MSME loan. Then we did a study and we realized that things are not as smooth as they are supposed to be. There is a huge chance of changing it and turning it upside down. So I'll not take too much time on that case study. What we did is we worked with banks, we worked with fintechs, we worked with technology companies to identify the problem. We then identified the solution that if it takes 4 weeks for a farmer to get a loan, can a loan be given in less than an hour, more or less through an STB process? Yes, that has happened. The project has been launched in 2 states, actually 3 states, going live in 2 more states with 6 banks. Same for cattle finance. So, usage of technology in India, usage of digital stack, I'm sure you've heard many speakers talk about how, what all we have achieved. What we need to reflect on in the financial sector, that there is a long way to go. And I'm sorry to say, Arshil, but finance is not equal to UPI. I'll be very candid here. Finance is beyond UPI. Finance is beyond payments. So there is so much, including credit, savings, insurance and everything, which is still a lot of friction for hundreds of millions of people. And I would only say and conclude in some ways that the 3 logos that you see there is frictionless e-commerce with ONDC, which is going to explode in the near future, as we all know. Frictionless payments, which NPCI has shown the world. And our mission of frictionless finance for 1 billion people, I think this trio will work together to ensure that India actually becomes a $10 trillion economy with finance as the underlying and digital at the underlying. With this, I'll request the panelists. Thank you so much. I didn't realize questions, but happy to answer any questions.
Sir, if you see, if you segment all these banks, one is PSU, other is private and cooperative banks. The PSUs and the private banks are ready to, or willingness to basically take digitalization to the next level. But what about the cooperative banks and other small banks where we are still struggling and there are so many things which are involved into this?
Okay, sir, I'm looking at, the first part of your observation. Yes, digital has been adopted by public and private banks, but my personal view is the time has come when they need to reinvent themselves also. Okay? If you look at their services architecture, it is monolithic architecture. Some of them don't keep customer at the center of digital journeys. That's an important point to be noted, that we should not presume that public and private banks are actually digital in the way consumers want it. And I'll answer the second part of the question. The consumer should get the service, financial service, when they want, how they want, where they want. Which is, unfortunately, we studied so many banks, so many customer journeys, that itself is not happening. Coming to the cooperative bank, that's a challenge, because even for our Kisan credit card we are looking at it. I would say we are counting on technology companies and TSPs to enable them in a large way, so that they can also come on the digital rails that India has built. That's the only answer I can give, which, we as RBIs are happy to engage with anyone. We are talking to a couple of companies already to see how can we bring cooperative sector, re-engineer their journeys and make it digital. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi sir, this is Soumya. I work for a financial services company. So the context is I've been working for 4-5 years. My questions are a little bit rudimentary, but with this thrust towards credit penetration, okay, we spoke about it in the earlier sessions as well. I assume we'll speak about it here. From a regulatory perspective, there is so much personal unsecured lending happening. Even the banks, there is a clear push towards, in the credit cycle, it's towards personal unsecured lending. Is that growth where you lend to an India 2 and 3, where they lend and you buy aspirational products with that money? And is that growth? And more importantly, is that good growth from a regulatory perspective? What would that entail?
So my friend present in the room now know my answer. We are not regulators. We are a company owned by RBI. So I would avoid commenting, but I'm happy to talk to you offline about my personal views on it. You have to understand, as a company owned by RBI, I have to be a little, off the record. So off the record will be, offline, not here. Happy to answer. Any more? And goes without saying that India has seen unicorns, that's one part of the story. But the fact is, I should add one more point, how we are also enabling unlocking of data from various data sources in the central and the state government, which itself will make it easy for RBI regulated entities to enable cash flow based lending, not just through account aggregator, but also through non-cash flow, like my land record, my dairy ERP system. So what Amul has done is, it has unlocked its dairy ERP, so I know what is the, my milk pouring data for last 3 years. And on that basis, 2 banks have already started lending. So that is also happening because we are in the sweet spot of owned by RBI. So no regulator, no owned by RBI, the lineage of RBI, but the agility of a startup. So we engage with everyone in the industry, including the state government and central government. So you will see soon more coming in this year. Anybody? Rahul, I know, I made it quick because I know you're running short of time. I thought you were running short of time. So hence but happy to discuss, debate, anything, any suggestions for us, maybe if we have 2 more minutes. Yeah, there's somebody.
Hi, my name is Ratish. The question is actually on the data part that you brought up. Today, are there parts of there has been an issue of data quality and overall data poverty, and it's great to know that some new sources of data are getting unlocked. As you see this, are there some parts where there is still an issue of data quality and poverty? Because that is probably going to be the biggest hindrance for us to get to that 1 hour target that you talked about. Would love to get your thoughts and inputs.
Yeah, so it is a challenge as we are discovering, hence we are piloting it. We are figuring out state governments, the quality of data. But the only thing I would say is, from where I come from 10 years back, we are in a much better position. And if there are users of data in terms of banks, fintechs, regulated entities, the central government as well as the state government do realize that they need to do more and more cleaning of data. So I don't name the 2 state governments. They have promised that in the next few months you will see a much better version of data that exists today because they realize the utility of that data. As that data was not used by anyone. Now it is being used for the benefit of their citizens. So all of that is happening. Yeah. Just on the sidelines, I'll tell you, one of the state governments conveniently closed their server for 10 days. And my team obviously asked their IT head, what the hell? He said, what is the big deal? We've been doing it for years. He said, now there is an API integration with banks. You can't do that. So the principal secretary was, oh no, now what do? I said, you will have to figure out times as good as SLA to keep data up, not just the quality of data. These issues will come up as we unlock data of central government. And, but not new to us. When you build Aadhaar, we build DBT, all of this is like a playbook which is playing back to me. So we know how to solve it as we go along. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Koshi and team, for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bansal, for the thoughts-proving session. And yes, it was wonderful listening to you. Thanks once again. And to facilitate him, I would like to call Mr. Rahul Anda is there. Can we have a huge round of applause for him?
I told you we are co-hosts. Why this club being ready? Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bansal, and thank you so much, Mr. Rahul. Okay, so we move on to our next round of panel discussion, where we seek to understand the digital leading and the changing landscape of financial inclusion. The topic of this discussion is enabling financial inclusion by leveraging the evolving Indian credit landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, before we jumpstart, kindly give me a moment to introduce you to the eminent panelist. We have Mr. Madhivanan Balkrishnan, Chief Operating Officer from IDFC First. Can we have a huge round of applause for him? Next on the panel is Mr. Pankaj Gargil, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer from ABHL. Can we give him a huge round of applause, everyone? We also have with us Mr. Rajesh Kumar, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer from TransUnion. Also joining us, Ms. Mridula Iyer, Managing Director from Citibank.
ऐसा कुछ है भी like छोटी सी तो पैनल है मतलब.
We also have with us Mr. Harshal Mathur, Chief Executive Officer and Co-founder from Razorpay. Next panelist, Mr. Nitin Chuk, Deputy Manager Director from SBI. And to moderate the panel discussion, may I request Mr. Anurag Chadda, Partner, McKinsey and Company. Let's give them a huge round of applause to all of them.
Thank you. Can you use this? Yeah.
So, sir, stage is all yours.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and a very, very good afternoon to everyone here, and thanks for taking out time post-lunch. I think many of the folks have already spoken, so I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I think the face of the Indian financial services industry has kind of changed and transformed for the last 10 years or so. I think from queuing up in bank branches where people used to remove cash to now, I think, scanning and paying, I think that's become a part of life. The next decade, or the decade as we now call it, can be very, very different, given specifically the emergence of the digital public infrastructure and the goods that India is building, and ONDC is obviously one of them. Many of you have envisioned, built this infrastructure over the last 10 years, and I'm deeply honored to kind of host you in this panel as we really look to imagine the next 10 years for Indian financial industry. With that backdrop, I think the real discussion for today, which is driving financial inclusion using digital public infrastructure in order to not just enable credit, as I think someone pointed out, financial services, not just payments, but it is beyond payments as well. So how do you really use, drive financial inclusion using digital public infrastructure? With that in mind, I think maybe I'll directly go to the questions without much ado. I think, how do you really see the next decade evolve in India, given all of this which is coming? And maybe, Madhi, we start with you, and then maybe I'll go with the other panelists as well.
I can answer this question from two perspectives. One is to sort of reflect back and say, where have we come from? And like you correctly pointed out, from the time when a consumer used to come to a branch and do virtually around there, whether it be payments, credit, withdrawing money and whatnot, I think we are in a very unique position where, primarily driven by UPI in the payment space, where a customer can do anything from anywhere. But like you correctly pointed out, I think this has been a realm of the elitist few. To what extent can we, while we can still claim that an UPI has managed to penetrate what a debit card or a credit card or any of the other payment instruments could not do, the very fact that our GDP continues to be high, but our per capita income is not yet on par with some of the emerging markets or the emerged markets, tells us how the amount of disparity which is there between, I wouldn't call them haves and have-nots, but the ability of the people who have not yet been a part of the digital world. This particular innovation that we are talking about, the ONDC, will effectively alter the basic unit economics, in my mind at least. So what, let me give you an example of a credit card. If I had to give a credit card to somebody earlier, I would not be able to justify anything below a credit, say a line of 50,000 bucks, because the cost involved in originating it and then managing the systems, which was primarily a proprietary model, almost similar to a platform, would be very high. Now imagine this world today, UPI from a simple payment mechanism. I think we have the regulation which is on the cards of which will enable us to give credit on UPI itself, or the emergence of new currencies like CBDC, which is taking it to the next level. So you have all the building blocks in place. And in the morning sessions, we spoke about the digital, the DigiLocker, the ability of somebody like an account aggregator, Sahamati, putting through an ecosystem which is bringing in the data together for us to consume. I think all the building blocks are there. And if I were to relook at what will happen in the next 10 years, it's going to democratize. And like I think Dr. Pramod put it very nicely by saying that we are actually going to reimagine the economics of this entire business and bring out the formalization and the inclusiveness of this vast economy. And that is possible because you're now not limiting yourself into some private pipelines that you have created. It's not a Visa Master network or even in the UPI side, the RuPay network, but an opening up of the world across both the consumers and the users. So on one hand, we're talking about the 100 million MSMEs. On the other hand, the huge base of people who will be looking at new formats. I mean, why should I use a phone? Can I speak into it? Can I play this story around? I think over the next 10 years, this story combined with payments, underlying with credit, ability to flow data along is going to be a fantastic space. And finally, it might not be a realm of the few banks or the fintechs, but actually a much larger ecosystem will play a much stronger role, which typically happens in an ecosystem, and that's how the play will play out. So very exciting times. The unbundling story effectively does not make it a realm of a bank or the large players, but a lot of smaller players can come into this game.
Yeah, and maybe Nitin, if I can ask you to add on, you have seen the scale, right, at one of the largest public sector banks as well. How do you see, from your vantage point, how does it kind of play out? And to Madhi's point, I think it may not be the realm of the elites, but I think there are a lot of the mass market innovations that are. But how do you see the next decade coming out?
No, I think one thing is for sure that it is not restricted to the elitist anymore or the mass affluent also. It is gradually and very, very certainly percolating. So that is something we should acknowledge. It might take time and we need some better solutions to be able to cater to that segment of the population. But let me again try and build on what Madhu was talking about from maybe 2 or 3 different lenses. The first thing is also the tech changes which will happen, are likely to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. Somebody spoke about data poverty, data quality. So now we will have more machine generated data as we are seeing now. So it will not be human entered data as much as what we've had in the past, which means that you can do a lot more with that data, which means that you can actually find far more intuitive and intelligent solutions for the end consumer. It doesn't matter whether they are at the top or at the bottom of the pyramid, but relevant solutions based on the good quality data that is getting generated. We are also going to have the data privacy bill, which will create the necessary framework and the legislation around what you can do, what you can't do. Okay, so all those things are happening in parallel. At the same time, we have the consent architecture already in place for the account aggregator. Okay, so customers over a period of time will get to know and realize that they own their own data and what is it that they need to do with the data. And this realization is only going to get better with time, and it is again going to percolate all the way down to the the last person in the pyramid. The other thing that is happening is also the socio-economic change. So people are coming up. It's not like people who were at the bottom of the pyramid are destined to be at the bottom of the pyramid. They are moving up, and by a lot of studies, it is an estimate that somewhere between 2030 and 2035, India will indeed become a middle-income country. Now, if India becomes a middle-income country with 100% saturation of smartphones, and with 5G and maybe 6G by that time, you can very well imagine that everybody is going to be on the network. So it is going to be very hard to exclude anybody saying that we can't reach that person. Infrastructure, you anyway know, there is a lot of work that's going on. So pretty much the entire country is going to get connected, even on the physical infrastructure side. So people are going to be reachable far more. The third thing that is happening is also in terms of the ecosystems and networks. So we created platforms, Pramod mentioned that these are networks and not necessarily platforms, but there are platforms which today exist in a private walled garden sort of a environment even today. Okay? If you remember, QR codes were COG when they were introduced, and then they were made interoperable. So when they became interoperable, it became a network. Okay? So the same thing ONDC is trying to achieve, account aggregator is trying to achieve. So I think we are certainly moving towards more network-led economy, and platforms will obviously then start talking to each other, they will connect with each other, and that will give the option of people who are on the platform to either connect to the network, or people who are not part of the platform have been excluded so far. So essentially between these three themes, we are certainly going to see a lot more inclusion happen, and not just from the point of view of having a bank account, but really the point that the minister also talked about in terms of saturating credit, insurance, health insurance. There's an equal amount of work that's happening on the health care side. Like the Arogya Setu now is actually a health services app now. It is no longer being used for contact tracing. If you ever update your Arogya Setu, I'm sure most people haven't even used it for the last 1 year. But if you update your app, you will see that it no longer does contact tracing. It has become a health services app where you can, find the nearest hospital, nearest blood bank, OPDs, etc. So with those kind of things happening, similar work happening in education, these are digital goods which the country is creating at a population scale, and these work best at a network level with the single-minded agenda of including everybody. So 10 years, I think, is a wonderful time for us to make sure that everybody is part of the whole benefit, long tail that these platforms and networks will create, and everybody moves up. So it may not be surprising that what we expect to happen by 2035 in terms of India being a middle-income country might actually happen even much before that.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think you paint an amazing picture of the future, but I think the reality in India today, I think, as somebody said, it's a study of contrast, right? With that, I think I may want to actually ask, what are the key challenges and issues that various stakeholders are truly facing on the ground, right? Both from the consumer, MSME, or financial institution. And what can, I think, a digital public infrastructure which is open and interoperable really solve, right? And maybe Rajesh, if I can kind of call you in for that, I think it would be just helpful. You have seen it across banks now also. So what are those real challenges across the stakeholders and institutions that you're seeing, and how can a digital public infrastructure on an open network really help?
Yeah, so challenges and the role, Anurag. Thank you. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. So, Anurag, I think I'll straight away go to the challenges part. I think the first, all that we spoke about this morning and all that we're talking about today, and I guess last few quarters and next few quarters, if not years, I think the largest problem that we have to solve, first of all, and I'll take that as the challenge between all of us, is really how we grow verifiable and portable data to create trust. And I keep thinking, how often do I have to prove that I'm a good guy? How often do I pull out my ID cards, my car dicky springs, go for a toss? Because every building I enter, at least commercial in nature, they seem to believe I'm carrying bombs, right? That's just nothing to do with data. I just had to throw that in. Okay. So first is verifiable and portable data to establish trust between borrowers and lenders, right? The borrower has to keep proving who he is. The lender is struggling to ascertain who the borrower is and also calculate the probability of default. All of this has been quite cumbersome, but I think we've made some good progress, but I would still say a long way to go. Sometimes I think there's just one CIBIL score that we can think of as a trust artifact. I think there is scope to create many more such artifacts across. If I'm an MSME, right, it's so difficult for me to get verifiable data, and I have to rely on collaterals, right? All round, I think it's about how we establish trust, first of all. And then this problem is more acute for India because of, our demographics. We are going to have the highest number of new to credit borrowers and new to bank borrowers for a long time from now. It just begun for us, right? So no other country would have so many people who have to prove their identity for the first time to start with. Yeah. And then repeatedly, right? Most other countries with their more aged demographics, they don't need to go through that. Same thing with small businesses. So very specific to India problem, and that's a starting point in terms of how quickly we onboard and provide the services. So for me, the biggest challenge really would be to ease up and take advantage of this entire ecosystem to create trust more easily. That's the first thing. Then coming to the role of open networks, I think all that we spoke about since morning it's really about interoperability of these networks, right? And we're talking about digital public goods. In going with my earlier point, it'll be interesting to see how we can get all these digital public goods together to prove my goodness. They're all disparate today, right? And that's why I'm super happy, and I was complimenting Mr. Koshi and Rahul. This is one of the few forums I've attended in many years with this kind of co-hosting and this kind of sponsorship. You don't see that happening too often, which in itself is a plus point and augurs well for the times to come. And when you spoke about role of open networks, I think this precisely is the role. Get these networks together, create that synapse, that interoperability. How do you enable that? And I think last but not the least, the role of these open networks will also be to create scale, which means large scale adoption. Because none of these really make sense unless you do millions of transactions. We all love UPI because of those volumes, right? So I think this is what I would really call as their role, to bring and enable the scale, to bring together the society, the industry. We had people from ITC in the morning today, right? So to bring together all these components of the industry and see how we can stitch together the world's best digital ecosystem that we're talking about now.
No, thank you. And maybe, Pankaj, if I may request you to also chime in on that one. I think you've served, I think, across the pyramid, right? While I think Rajesh spoke about from a bureau standpoint, but it's just lovely to hear from a financial institution standpoint. What are the real challenges of an MSME or a consumer?
I think, good afternoon, everyone. I think to build on what Rajesh said, I think 3 or 4 things which come to my mind. I think for proliferation of any network, or for that regard any system, simplicity leading to scale, I think, is extremely important. And lots has been said about credit not working, I think. Not working. Whenever I am saying not working, working. So simplicity, I think, is one very critical thing, and I'll just give you a parallel. So while lots has been spoken about the unmet credit demand and a lot of data was kind of given, so I'll not repeat that. But on insurance, for example, in India, right? So we have a penetration of life insurance of about 3%, even lesser in health insurance. And India, in entirety, if you look at the data, overall insurance premium that gets collected in India, 75% of that is LI, and 25% is the other insurance products, which is very different from advanced countries. And there, any amount of network or any amount of digital penetration today is not working because the products are not very, very simple, right? So therefore you need intermediaries. While if you see banking, the role of intermediaries actually has over a period of time come down. And traditionally also, lot of origination has happened through branches and through direct sales. So I think simplicity is one, very, very critical element, when it comes to the challenge. And how can that be overcome, I think, is extremely, extremely important. The second thing, which comes to my mind is, and I was reflecting, and a lot of analogies on, UPI and NPCI were given. And, having been associated, Madhu was also associated with NPCI, and so was I. I think there were 4 things which actually made that network, go the distance. And, I will just capture that. I think government intervention, and not in that order, but, first and foremost, a regulator, which, and you had a limited set of, banks to influence to first sign up. So 40 banks that had to get influenced. Majority of the banks were shareholders. So it was also their responsibility to, participate. That was very, very important. The second thing is regulator who was, behind getting everyone, to participate. Third, the type of capital which, came into the country, which, created a business model around this network. I think we have to give it, to all the, providers there, based on which, banks participated. So that type of capital also, is very, very important, in this space. And I'm talking specifically about ONDC. And fourth, of course, government intervention, which is, the entire cost of transacting, which was brought down very, very significantly, because for anything to proliferate, it has to be simple, it has to be low cost. Yeah. Otherwise, the adoption is not going to be there. So I think these 4 elements, here the challenge is larger. In my assessment, there's a very wide range of players, yes, who's involved. So it's not only the 40-45 banks, few fintechs who are involved. Government intervention in some form, I don't know in what form, but it has to, logically come. and that may lead to the change in cost, of operation. And there is, in my assessment, there will have to be some regulatory framework which also, puts all this together. Otherwise, it will be important, a great initiative, but it may not become imperative. And once the imperativeness, converts to experience, then you actually start seeing it proliferating. So in my mind, two elements: simplicity, bringing down the cost, which essentially is, bringing down intermediation, and last but not the least, all this has to be communicated in a very, very succinct manner. I think a live example of this is, and we all talk about lending, talk about insurance, but the way mutual fund, the deposit industry in India is 200 lakh crore, very, very, I would say at a very gradual pace, at an even faster pace in the deposits. You've had the mutual fund industry growing. It's crossed about 45 lakh crores, in the country. And mutual fund sahi hai, which was the campaign, which runs, from the mutual fund, industry. In my assessment also is making it that element of trust, which, in the FS space is so important. I think a communication around, how this is, meaningful, how this can be trusted. So building of a theme around, the simplicity, the customer convenience, and also the cost, I think will have to get done to overcome the challenges that, I see as far as the success of the network.
No, thank you. I think you spoke about the 4 elements, and that actually brings me to the third question, right? What are the biggest use cases that the banks and financial institutions see? I think using these open networks like an ONDC, right, to drive this inclusion. Maybe, Bradala, if I can request you to kind of come in. I think while the 4 elements are there in terms of principle, but what are the use cases that the banks are really wanting to kind of build on such networks?
Many, right? I mean, if you just see an interaction between a bank and a financial institution and a client, whether it is a retail client and a corporate client, every step of that interaction even today has a lot of friction, making that engagement very difficult. Of course, building that trust and getting verifiable information is one piece of it, but just the whole legacy that we have in terms of the documentation requirement, the way our tech stack has been built, and I can speak for banks, it makes that engagement and interaction extremely difficult. And I would say that what these open networks are doing is, for each of those friction points, actually it is allowing us to translate it into a use case which can be solved by accessing these open digital networks. And I guess like when Aadhaar and other repositories were created around GST, PAN, I think over the last few years, banks and financial institutions has leveraged that to simplify the KYC processes, right? We've seen a lot of improvements in the retail space, but I would still say corporate account opening is still quite cumbersome because I think the extent of due diligences even from a bank's end is pretty high, right? So again and again, I think we need to, between banks and fintechs like Razorpay, we have to start thinking about how do we leverage these networks to make, say, an onboarding and a KYC process simple for customers alike, retail or corporate. Of course, a credit bit has been spoken about, and we've talked about it in almost every session. And I think there is still, we have to crack it in a good way as to how do we lend responsibly to the right people for the right end uses. And again, I think in the future, these open digital networks will play a very, very big role, because what essentially they are doing is that they are ensuring that, to a very large extent, trusted, verifiable, and consistent data is being made available to all service providers like banks so that we can consume it in the same manner, rather than there being information and documentation arbitrage between financial services players, right, which sometimes lead to that lack of trust and maybe a little bit of irresponsibility in the way lending is consumed by clients. So that is one. Other interesting stuff that we are seeing, especially in the areas that we operate, with a lot of our MNC client base, etc., we are seeing is that data, which I think banks had a lot of data always, right? But I don't think we ever knew exactly how to leverage that data to make decisions, not just for ourselves, but also probably help our clients to make good decisions. And again, a combination of what these open digital networks are providing in terms of data content, marrying it with the data that banks have from the transactions that you process, etc., we've started seeing use cases of how you can translate that into good insights for our clients to help them make good business decisions, right? And how they can serve their customers better, how they can improve their selling power, how they can make their client journey and experience far more efficient. So I think this is just the beginning, I would say. As we have been talking since morning, the use case possibilities are limitless. And as these networks gain traction and awareness with everyone, I think more and more people will come onto the platform to innovate, and there will be like more use cases that will get created. But for now, I think these are what we're seeing.
Thank you. I think customer experience for onboarding, credit for corporate and retail, and leveraging data for insights and decision making. But Harshal, I think you've been kind of innovating along with the banks, but also on the side. Would love to kind of hear from you. What are the big use cases you are really thinking to build on the top?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest advantages of open networks is that there's a lot of data that's generated. And not like data is available in multiple forms, but the advantage of open networks is that the right kind of smart data is generated at the right point of time, and it's available real time, right? So you a lot of times when by the time the data comes to you, it is already stale. But open networks allow you to get access to the data on a faster and real time fashion. What you can do with that data is, from a financial perspective, is there are so many problems that are yet to be fully solved. Let me start with payments, right? Like, while we all feel that payments is solved now with UPI and everything, it has only solved specific type of payment flows like P2P or P2M at best. But when you look at, for example, B2B flows, when you look at B2G flows and so many other kind of payment flows, these are still being done through traditional old channels which are not as real time or as smart as something like UPI is. And that is one area. The second, as Mridula spoke about credit, we are a country where there is a lot of credit supply and a lot of credit demand, but somehow both of them don't end up meeting each other. And I think that is where open networks can play a role in creating the right kind of scoring or data at the right point of time through which lenders can lend, and the people who really need access to that credit can be connected back. And I think that is where sachet-type credit providers, I think Madhi spoke about, that how can you reduce the cost of credit so low that you can give small 10,000, 15,000 rupees loan instead of a 50,000 or a lakh rupee loan that you are able to give today. And the most important aspect for that is the cost of servicing has to go down significantly. And that can only happen when you can reach the demand at the right point of time, right? Like at the edge of it, without investing that much manpower or resources to reach the demand. The third area is insurance. And Pankaj spoke about that like, today, we are a very diverse country, and the biggest challenge of financial services, including credit and insurance, is that we are trying to create one single product that applies to the entire country. So one credit card or a one term life policy, right? But the kind of risks that, let's say, somebody who drives a car in Bombay faces versus somebody who drives a car in a small town faces is significantly different. So how can you have one single auto insurance policy? And that is where things like something like an open network can allow you to create tailor-made products or solutions targeting the specific individual, their usage habits, their, if you're talking about credit, their spend habits, if you're talking about insurance, their usage habits, and you can create tailor-made products and solutions right at the point of utilization. The last thing would be, I think, a lot of financial services that are built on top of this, things like advisory, things like treasury, wealth management, all of those can be done far better when you have access to data which is more meaningful and more identifiable at the point of consumption. So I think there'll be a lot of opportunities like that will keep coming up. I mean, we are right at the start of leveraging open networks. I think we have, I can speak from our perspective that we have used the payments information that has been generated in the last 5-10 years to create better credit underwriting, working with lenders, working with banks, creating better banking experiences, creating better disbursement experiences. I think now it's something like ONDC coming up and NBFC kicking in. I think the next layer would be to enable credit and credit, insurance, treasury, and so many different solutions in a far more deeper fashion. I think the cost of servicing is going to come down drastically as we leverage open networks more and more, and that will allow us to reach the customers that have not yet been touched by digital financial products.
No, I think you spoke about this gap, right? The structural gap, and it's interesting that you said it because it brings me to the next question, which is, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to. Me and Pankaj go back a long way, around 2015, 16, when we didn't have this privilege of UPI, not yet big. We did a very small experiment. We had a lot of MSME customers who used to keep balances with our bank. I think between Pankaj's front-end business unit, the technology to sort of capture this data in one scale, and business analytics actually doing a very simple analysis of, if I can see a pattern of the data, if a guy keeps, let's say, an X amount of money in his account, then he suddenly became credible from our perspective. Imagine this was a closed loop, because our bank had these customers with us, we had full visibility of the transactions, we had the ability to analyze it, and on top of it, and how did we give this line? I think to Harshal's point of the timing, we just went and opened up on the internet portal that the MSME client had this much amount of OD line available. He didn't even launch it, if I'm not mistaken, Pankaj. The pickup rate was so huge. I mean, we were all pretty surprised. Cost of origination was less, credit quality was fantastic, because you're giving it to a guy whom you know it. Now, circa today, if I have to replicate that model with the ONDC world, imagine the customer is not with me as a bank. Now I'm a much younger bank with much lesser data, not that kind of a legacy like Nitin might have in SBI, but the ability to go and pick up an AA data from Sahmati, the ability to use Razorpay because he is doing my merchant gateway and I happen to be one of the back-end settlement bank, or he happens to be my client, or actually going to TransUnion and doing what he makes a lot of money on all of banks between him and Kamak, which is, we just call it as a scrub model. I mean, wherein we are just checking out how the scores are behaving, and then using the internal data, what is my credit appetite, and opening it out to this huge base of MSMEs. And if ONDC were to come in and say, okay, there is this particular hotel industry which is doing the certain transactions, and I start getting the track, and if my analytics wing is able to bring in those, I mean, imagine the probabilities. Now I'm still talking elitist, I'm still talking urban, but if this story, if the cost of unit sales, the cost of goods equivalent becomes lesser, we can start doing it like Mr. Bansal said, for that Kisan or for that purchase of the cows. I think the possibilities are huge, and the challenges, if I at all see, again we struggle with Rajesh's queue. What is the quality of data that we submit to him? I mean, we are in the organized industry, our quality still sucks. Imagine the ability of the network to collect this data and putting it in a common way, and then finally the regulator needs to allow things which we keep lobbying with. I think the world will open up.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it was one of the things that I also wanted to know about innovation, but you spoke about it. But in order to make that happen, what are those structural enablers, right? I think you spoke about the whole gap that continues to exist, and would just love to maybe hear, I think the quality of the data, obviously we submit to Rajesh, but maybe Rajesh, what are the structural enablers you will need from the industry, right, to be put in place in order to kind of this to just take off?
First of all, thanks, Madhi. Yeah, one of my 4 points was actually better usage of unique identifiers. We do, but I'll come to that later. Come back to your question. Systemic enablers, I think there should be 3 or 4 that come top of the mind to me. First and foremost is ensuring interoperability. I think all of these public networks or open networks or public digital infra, I think the full benefit comes on only if we create interoperability, and UPI, they've proven this with a real life example. Each time it opens up to the next on interoperability, it just makes you say, wow, I mean, there's so many more things possible there. So first is ensuring interoperability. Second would be enabling legislation. The minute you talk about multiple networks coming together, or when you say network of networks, there has to be some kind of a legislation/regulation covering this, because we all need that kind of a clarity when it comes to anything to do with the digital or data. Who can I share data with, in what form, etc., etc. We all talk about data security, privacy, etc. But overall, these kind of initiatives are best handled when there's a nice governing legislation. I think SICRA is a great example. 2006, that act came, and we saw the value that the bureaus could add to our lending industry. It's a great example. So I think enabling legislation is the second one. Third is what Madhi said just now, very close to my heart, the usage of unique identifiers, better and better usage, because today we have multiple ID systems and multiple ID cards. My voter ID can change if I change states. My passport expires and I get a new one with a new number, PANs, etc. So multiple ID systems and multiple IDs. So as we get more networks to come together, more disparate data sets and digital infrastructure will talk to each other, and that common identifier, you don't want to let it become entirely probabilistic. That will cause disputes and errors. We have, with such a large population, so many wonderful initiatives that we're talking about, that identifier has to be the whole thing has to be deterministic science. It can't be a law of probability that Madhi is who he claims to be, and all of us taking so much effort to confirm that this is indeed the same Madhi that he claims to be.
Yeah.
So I think that identifier is super critical. And fourth one, I think lots and lots of awareness and education. There was a brief chat in the morning about the small shops and small merchants and businesses, OEMs, MSMEs, for all of them to kind of enroll and avail the real benefits of this kind of an infrastructure, there'll have to be lots more education and awareness. I want to talk to my chacha, kaka in different parts of the country, in the small towns, and they should be talking about these networks, not just us guys who literally do this for a living. So a whole lot of awareness and education would be, these are the four enablers: legislation, interoperability, education, awareness, and unique identifier. Thanks.
And maybe, Nitin, if I can, you've been trying to stitch together all the public goods as well, right? So are there any other systemic enablers that you believe, I think, which are needed in order for you to kind of get that scale that I think you've been imagining?
I think in addition to what Rajesh said, I think he's prepared for this question. But the one thing that I think we also need is standardization, because all networks work on standardized protocols. And Rajesh also spoke about a lot of state governments, wanting to digitize their data and their records, etc. So one of the things that we are coming across is there is a very, very urgent need for standardization before it becomes too late. Like the payment rails have been built on top of standardized protocols. OCEN is a standardized protocol, BECN is a protocol. So we need that standardization, both not just from the fact that people should be able to join the network, but also from a cybersecurity point of view. And that is something which networks will expose us to, a very different degree of cyber risks. And they can be best prevented only when there are very clear standards, either people follow or they are ejected out.
Yeah, and I think you brought this point of risk, and that was maybe the second last question. But what are the biggest risks you guys are seeing from the industry standpoint for it to kind of scale up? And maybe, Mridula, if I can ask you, and then Pankaj on the same one. I think the top two risks that you really see for this to not take off.
I think, see, when these are all new concepts, right, and this has to be absorbed by all market participants. So even the risks have to be uniformly understood. Today, I think there is a different understanding of what the risk is coming from all of such open network where information is traveling so fast. People who have come from manual legacy infrastructure setup where 2-4 pairs of eyes looked at everything to now where nobody's looking at it and machines are talking to each other. That is exposing us to a very different kind of risk. Yes, and as bankers and financial institutions which are very close to the money movement, we've also started experiencing some of those risks, right? Where your things are happening without your knowledge because systems and machines are talking to each other. Of course, you can mitigate all of that with the right controls. But first of all, awareness of what are the new risks that will come from plugging into various open network. I think that has to be dimensioned very well. Cyber, data privacy risk, data security risk, all of this, not every bank and every financial institution today has the ability to build those walls, safety walls, which can protect them, right? And we've seen a lot of breaches. So I think that is, for me, like the topmost risk. And then, I mean, as we say that information security, again, linked to data, but how is the end use of this data being, how is it put to use, right, the data? I think that is another stuff. If you look at regulations, the way they have evolved over years, there has been a lot of focus on end use on everything, whether it is you give out a loan, whether you give out cards, any other product, right? So financial industry is used to working with a set of regulations, and therefore as you start working in an independent environment which feels good and very liberating, I guess the governance and the regulations around it is important so that information flow, data flow, all the participants act in a manner which is kind of, cohesive yes, and works well for all the ecosystem participants. So these are, I would say, as the top 2-3 risks that we need to mitigate as these initiatives scale up. We're still some time away from it, but an early assessment of these risks will be helpful.
Yeah, and maybe Pankaj, anything to add on those?
So I feel that one of the biggest use cases that is being spoken of is credit in this entire initiative or this the ONDC. And I'll just draw parallel, to what, so credit risk anyways, and all of us are doing lending for so many years. So there are two elements, intention to repay and ability to repay. Those two are the basic tenets of lending. Bureau, when it was not there, and in the initial years of lending, the intention to repay, the way I used to remember doing a field investigation myself, trying to ascertain what are the, taking a neighbor reference, used to be, the element of the intention to repay that you used to take, and, taking those two references in the application form and speaking to them to understand the intention to repay. Slowly over a period of time, of course, with the advent of Bureau and now the advanced, data analytics, the ability that we have on the Bureau, the intention to repay is sorted. And very interestingly, Rajesh, people who have a particular score and above, and we all speak about the various trend lines, etc. that we have, and the various dimensions of the score. The customers, interestingly, who are new to credit also are behaving very similar to the customers who have a great score. So that is another paradox. So the intention to repay part has been over a period of time. I would say it is sorted. It can become even better. But I think the risk which emanates is in estimating the ability, and lots of work is happening. And when we talk about MSME, having led that business for several years in the bank earlier also, there were so many pilots that we did for income estimation. So the caution that I will have is that and all that data that 1 crore Indians pay GST, tax, income tax, we all know. And on the other side, we have 10 crore SMEs, MSMEs, 9 crores. So when you estimate the income, I think what can be done, and all the surrogates that all of us have with all the information that is coming in. The word of caution here will be that we have to tread carefully, because all the surrogates that we have to do those pilots to understand and to really estimate just the way today intention. We are fairly clear. I think on income estimation also, if there was a bureau which was created for income estimation, of course there are a number of initiatives around that. I think it would have been really great. The other element apart from credit risk is of course what Mridula spoke of, which is of course the data risk. And the entire data protection bill, in my assessment, the very good thing that you see in that is the entire consent architecture and the ability to revoke consent also, which was never there, and for what purpose data is being used. And we have a great example of what is happening with ChatGPT, where how the data is being used is itself getting into question. So how the data is going to be used is also an inherent risk that will be there. The last and the most important from my perspective is, and I had covered it earlier also, education. Education of what somebody is getting into when somebody is getting into the platform. What are the various elements, I think is extremely crucial. We have seen it in UPI also. Fraud risk is very large, and I remember one of the products where all of us used to struggle, the UPI Collect, for example. So there are several features which get created, several propositions that are created which are very fraud prone. So I think building on the learnings from there, and not letting them come into the track, I think is also going to be very, very important. So I think those are the three, broad risks, from my side, which I can say apart from the three things that I said earlier about the interventions required by the government, the regulator, and the participants. Those are the risks.
So thank you. And maybe the last question, and make it very, very specific. What will be your suggestions to ONDC or recommendations to ONDC to achieve in the next 12 months? So if there's a great outcome that the industry can look at, right? What would be those suggestions? Maybe the one or two ideas, and maybe I'll start with you, Harshal, and then I think go around for everyone.
Yeah, I think when we talk about building financial products, the most important requirement will be collaboration. That there are a lot of entities that need to work together to really create stronger financial products, something like credit or insurance or managing cybersecurity. So how can we create the right frameworks for multiple entities, banks, fintechs, financial providers, all of them to come together and be able to, of course, with the right consent, be able to utilize the data that's generated and be able to build stronger financial products on top of it. I think that will be critical to drive it. And I think UPI is a great example of that. The way UPI's interoperability is built, it allows multiple entities to come together and do their own roles. Somebody does merchant acquiring, somebody does consumer acquiring, somebody does the reconciliation settlement part, and they are all able to collaborate and create the right experience for the customer. So if we are able to leverage those learnings and replicate that on top of ONDC, I'm sure we'll be able to create, like, it's hard to put in exactly what financial products will come out of it, but there are so many different areas that we've all talked about, and now with innovations like Pankaj spoke about, like ChatGPT and stuff, a lot more such innovations will happen on top of it automatically, as long as we are able to bring all these entities together.
Okay, so collaboration. Okay.
I have two specific points. I think what ONDC needs to do, and this does not apply only to ONDC, it actually applies to the rest of the ecosystem that is going to be connecting with this thing. The ability to do governance is very important. If we had to learn anything from UPI, which is almost, 2 decades from the time when we started off and how it has evolved, one of the best practices that has emerged, and both me, Pankaj, Murdula, all of us were on the NPCI board at some point of time or the other, is the ability to regulate. While openness and innovation is great, I think if you don't put the guardrails right now, what kind of a governance are we talking about? A dispute resolution. You needed an RBI to come in and force us to call an online dispute resolution mechanism, because the number of complaints which come, forget about the technical rejections. We all talk about the glamorous part of UPI. I think there is a huge base of customers who are getting duped, who are getting misled. I mean, this is happening with one in the bunch of regulated entities. If ONDC were to actually really scale up, I mean, it's good that we are in the very early stages and we are having discussions like this, which will enable us to do it. But the rules and regulations that needs to be put in place so that we can grow in a much more responsible manner is very important. Customer protection, dispute resolution, interoperability between partners, accountability. Otherwise, please do not be surprised if RBI were to come down and thrash us. And we are not a platform, we are an ecosystem, we are a network. And like Mridula pointed out, you're only as strong as the weakest link. And the kind of examples that we've been getting when it comes to the cyber world is mind-boggling. I mean, we can get hit from anywhere. And I'm again putting on the banker's hat and saying, if you're sitting in a regulated entity, keeping the depositors' money, and you're trying to facilitate this world, boss, we have to be very, very careful. And if these roles, whether it be AA, whether it be DigiLocker, whether it be ONDC itself, in my mind, at this point of time, we are a part of the advisory council of ONDC. It's a bit of an open-ended kind of a thing. We need to sort of concentrate and put some rules, and we should be flexible enough to evolve. But I think we need to bring that bit. Otherwise, it'll be too much of, like a popcorn factory, but not knowing how to package it and deliver it as we go along. Otherwise, we'll have a big havoc in our hands.
I think two suggestions, to add to Madhi. I second, what he's speaking about governance. And in FS, I think all of us are trustees of public money. If you have mutual fund or life insurance, is the other way around. So I think the element of trust is extremely important. So the governance and regulation that we spoke about, I completely agree. I'll just again say, awareness of this, of the ONDC also, because it has to cater to a very diverse set of industries, clarity on what it brings on the table, what are the various elements, what is in it for the customer, what is in it for every participant. I think that clarity, in my assessment, there needs to be more. Definitely, that, needs to be done. That is very clear. The other, element also is that, and this is a slightly, we are coming to towards the end, but I think what is the customer wanting, is somewhere, I think we have to get there.
The benefit for the customer.
Because, I think it's a great idea that, we have created a platform, so platforms, network, all that is what we are thinking. So what is the customer actually wanting? I think that assessment also needs to be done, because that is going to guarantee the success there. So it's about awareness, governance, and customer insights, which will help us to create specific use cases, for ONDCs to succeed. And the tech architecture, which has to be very, very simple for each one of the companies, because, each company in this, since it's so wide, it covers so many industries. And, looking at, I am from the Aditya Birla Group, for example, when I look at, various companies within the group, every organization is a different, digital maturity, technological maturity, because of the nature of the industry. So maybe, when we are looking at ONDC and we are drawing parallels to UPI, the set that we are addressing is very different here. It is not the FS, space, which has a very specific way of looking at things. So I think, how can we simplify it further, make it more communicatable? I think that is what we'll have to do. So those are the suggestions that, I have.
I think everything has been said, but I'd probably like to re-emphasize one point that was touched upon in the morning discussions. It's about the only recommendation or suggestion I have for ONDC is to see how we can all work together and ensure and confirm that the small shops, the mom and pop businesses, how are their interests well protected. End of the day, historically at least, right? Anything digital has come and eaten up space in the physical world. Many Mumbaikars here, Rhythm House doesn't exist, right? A lot of bookshops are gone. So in the end, large digital infrastructures do eat up physical spaces. And in India, employment creation, job creation is super important given the nature of our demographics. So we can't afford just Costco's and IKEA's and Papa John's and few of those kind of oligopolistic markets. So that's the only thing. I think it'll be interesting to see how we shape this and take care of their interests as well.
I think in addition to everything, for ONDC to be successful as an initiative, I guess that experience is going to be super important, because they are operating in a space where people are already used to like really some premium experience, right, of e-commerce, the way the other platforms have delivered. So as customers dabble between two experiences, it is important for ONDC and all of us as partners in this initiative to try and see that we get this initiative to the same experience level as far as client is concerned, because price point, etc. is one. But if the experience has to be there, because that's what clients are used to in the last few years, right? So I would say focusing on client experience will be one big thing.
Last comments, Nazim.
No, since I serve on the board also of ONDC, so I'll not be prescriptive here, because we anyway do that in the board meetings. But I think two things. One, of course, we need more socializing like this, because this is an idea that really needs to go wide and far. And not so much for ONDC, but everybody who's here today as part of the conference needs to also go and socialize this whole thing. This is not just a learning session for ourselves. I think all of us need to play a role to take this. The second one, of course, is I think ONDC will solve the problem of access to the small seller who will become a part of the network. But over time, I think we will have to build the agenda of also growing the same seller into, not just always for the rest of their life remaining a small business. Because I'm sure every business aspires to be a larger business. It's just that they need access and they need. So the access to the market or the market linkage will happen through the network, ONDC. Access to credit will happen through all that we've been discussing in this panel today. Access to payments is already there. Now the only thing is that how do we also create some capability building or work towards capability building to also grow these businesses into from micro to small, from small to medium, so that they also prosper over a longer period of time.
No, thank you. Thanks a lot for the valuable suggestions. And I can see Rahul tipping on the watch right now, saying it's a lot of time, but it was wonderful to host you. Very, very insightful suggestions as well as thoughts. And I think, as many of you said, I think the industry has to kind of collaborate together to kind of make this happen. It's not only one institution or one individual who can do it. But thank you again. It was a pleasure hosting you all, and look forward to kind of obviously building this out with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the panel members for this wonderful discussion. And to facilitate all the panel members, I would like to call Mr. Rahul Anda on the stage.
He's already there.
Okay, so let's proceed with it. Let's give them a huge round of applause, everyone. on the current status, challenges and opportunities of digital agriculture marketplace. The topic for the same is unlocking digitalization in agriculture, B2B and B2C. And to participate in this immensely critical discussion, we have some of the best industry experts among us. Please allow me to introduce you to the respected panel members of this panel discussion. Our first panelist is Mr. Rathish Balkrishnan, co-founder and managing director, Satwa. Can we give him a huge round of applause, everyone? Followed by
ये आज वीडियो बनाने का हमारा यही पर्पस है कि थोड़ा सा ये अलग
followed by
मिर्ची है,
Dr.
हटके मिर्ची है,
Maninder
थोड़ा सा
Kaur, Managing Director, SFAC. We also have Mr.
माल
Rahul
दिखा दीजिए थोड़ा इसका भी
Goraha, Vice President,
इसको लगाए कितना दिन हुआ?
Business, ITC.
इसको 2.5 महीना हो गए
Also joining us, Mr. Nikhil Toshtiwal, Vice President, Digital and Network Initiative from the Heart. And to moderate this session, allow me to call upon on stage Miss Nikita Mathani, partner, McKinsey and Company. Can we give them a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, all the people out there? Mr. Nikhil Toshtiwal, Vice President, Digital and Network Initiative from the Heart. Thank you so much to all the panel members. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, good evening everybody, and thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. I think the team has already introduced the esteemed panel members here, so I will get ourselves started. The topic for the discussion for this panel is how do we use digital to really unlock value in agriculture sector, right? And in that context, how can ONDC play a role and what are some of the big enablers which will come in through this intervention? I think before we get started, right, a little bit of context, which I think all of us here are aware of. India is very fortunate to have very strong endowments in agriculture, right? We are second largest producer of agri-commodities globally. We are actually largest in many of the commodities, right, like mango, shrimp, many of the fruits and vegetables we export, second largest in rice. So we have a very strong starting point in a very large agriculture sector, but despite that, there have been many challenges, right, in the agriculture sector, and many of these are owing to smallholder land holding, right? So you talk about inputs, you talk about inefficiencies, the yields being low compared to global averages, the penetration of mechanization, etc., being low, and also inefficiencies on the market side where there are a lot of middlemen and the linkages are broken, right? These are all inherent challenges which have existed in this industry. I know there's been a lot of improvements also, right? We have come a long way over the last, I would say, 2-3 decades, but still long way to go. And in that context, digital technology can play a very, very critical role in unlocking, value in this sector. And that's the topic for today's discussion, which is how do we use digital to truly unlock value, solve some of the inherent challenges, and take the sector to the next level of, I would say, shine and rise, right? So in that context, we have a very diverse group of panel here, and I think we'll hear perspective from different lenses. We have, agri-tech founders, we have incumbents actually doing agri-tech work, and we have government, foundation, all kinds of voices on the panel. So to start with, right, my first question, and this is a question to all the panel members, what are the biggest challenges that you all have experienced when it comes to using digital in agriculture, right? Would just love to hear your perspective on what's the current starting point in terms of challenges which have been coming in the way of digital really taking a big role in the agriculture sector. Maybe we can start with Dr. Maninder, your side.
Thank you, Nitika. I think the biggest challenge when it comes to taking digital to agriculture is the cost of going digital. So if we look at the farmers, and there are so many solutions available worldwide, and people say you do this and your productivity is going to shoot up and there's going to be a traceability, the buyer is going to know exactly which seed you used, how you watered it, what was the fertilizer you used. So all of it's doable, but it has a cost. And agri-commodity being, most of it being staples which are used across, the price differential of actually factoring this into your input cost and then realizing it is very unlikely to happen. The second thing which comes in is the ease of going digital. If you look at any of the platforms one needs to navigate to either buy or to sell, the very fact that we are dealing with a person who may be only knowing the local dialect, they will not be able to traverse the platforms, most of which are still bilingual, or maybe one of the regional languages, definitely not factoring in the local words which are used. And I think the biggest impediment which I'm mentioning last is the sheer hold of vested interests at all levels. There is a complete, people don't want the sector to go digital because there's so many interests which are grey. And when you become digital, you are either black or you white. So the grey vanishes. Yeah. Now, there's nothing good or bad about it. That is what the situation is. Right. To go digital, it is to become transparent and completely overboard that these are my transactions, whether taxable or not, and this is my credit line, again, whether permissible or not. But that's the biggest challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Your thoughts?
I could go next. Yeah. So, I think if you even remove agriculture and just look at technology, EdTech, health tech, ag tech, what you typically see is that these technology solutions are able to address the topsoil of the market, which is players who have ability to pay, players who have a certain agency, players who have a certain comfort in language, etc. Going beyond the topsoil has always been a challenge, and we're seeing that in other sectors as well. I think what makes it specifically difficult in agriculture, I think, is three things. I think the first is the fact that the amount of context dependency that is there in agriculture is much higher than what you would see in education or even health for that matter. Medical prescriptions for a disease don't change by location, but prescriptions for land and others change by location. That's number one. I think the second reason is that disaggregation of farmers. The customer acquisition of farmers is not as easy. Students go to schools, you can go there, you can go to hospitals, where do you go for farmers? And the level of disaggregation in the value chain, I think, is significantly high. Right? And the third is very similar to the point that was made, that the agency of the farmer to be able to use it on their own without assisted support is extremely high. And in some sense, all of these challenges mean that achieving economies of scale while ensuring context relevance becomes a challenge. For me, these three probably are the first set of questions. Happy to answer more things as we go through the discussion.
Thank you, Ritesh. Rahul?
I think just to maybe build upon what the panelists said and also introduce a slightly different take. I mean, whatever we've been doing this work extensively over the last few years. And one observation is that the farmers or this sector is ripe for adoption. When we look at typical penetration, if we take, we've done some extensive work on it, the availability of smartphone is more than 70% in a typical village. If you look at a typical phone of the farmer, right, take his permission, use his phone or see his screen, typically 2 to 3 hours a day, either a YouTube or a WhatsApp they are able to use, right? So somewhere, my own take is that we seem to think that digital adoption is a challenge. They don't know how to use it, but they do know. right? So in my mind, they are quite ready to do it. Maybe the use case for it, right? Right now when they use a YouTube or a WhatsApp, it is to get a lot of information around agri, right? So there is a lot of willingness, there is also ability to do, right? What I think we are now ready for are specific use cases which generate very clear value for the farmer. The digital use cases where he sees distinct value, I think the adoption will happen. So whilst there are challenges, I mean this is a one element I wanted to introduce, that clear value proposition is a challenge, I would say, right now. I think lot of the tools that are getting built, I think this theme is Bharat, right? And lot of the people who are building it, maybe they come from a mindset of you and me, right? But a lot of user experience, a lot of interfaces, we take it for granted that what you and I find intuitive is what a farmer would find intuitive. And I think somewhere that is a challenge, or that's a hindrance to be overcome. Text, for example, is not intuitive to them. Voice is intuitive, short form videos are intuitive. So I think that reorientation of digital towards that, I think is one thing to be done. In terms of one challenge that I do see, right, which is which if unlocked can lead this to go to a 10x kind of a scale, is a lot of foundational layers here are still not available, right? Whether it is geolocation data, some basic farmer identity data, and so on and so forth. That data resides today, it is in different pockets, they don't speak to each other. I think that is a layer which somewhere in UPI was built out, and then it could get unleashed. I think that basic agri stack layer, which is getting built right now, I would say, that is the missing piece, one of the missing piece, I would say. So I would, rather than just presenting a picture of challenges, I would say its time is right. There are those 2-3 nudges that are needed, and we can really see an explosion.
Thank you, Rahul.
It's great to come after the renowned, I would say, panelists and being the youngest of all. So, from the heart perspective, indeed, number of challenges, I would say that where are the challenges, they were the opportunity for the agri-tech companies like us. But however, if I have to break down the answer, that where do we see the movement being constraints in terms of digital adoption for the farmers or for the upper layer with the micro entrepreneurs? I wouldn't talk about the layers about that, because that's their business call to go digital or not to. But if I talk about from a layer of a farmer, so one challenge is social barrier. Social barrier in the sense that I would second, yes, our namesake smartphone penetration is being increasing, but we should know that the average age size of a farmer is 41 years old. That's way different from the other industry, where we talk about e-com in terms of ONDC, in terms of other aspect, we are talking about an average size of 21 years person, versus when you talk about farmers, we are talking about an average size of 42 years. And that creates an all amount of traditional baggage to go digital and what to. Second part is that in terms of technical barriers in the sense that if a customer or potential beneficiary is not able to come to the system should be able to reach out to them. And that requires right filtration, that requires right data stack, because you cannot bombard all the set of farmers. So that limits the kind of, I would say, companies or I would say organizations to tip down, okay, if I have to consider it upon maybe an age group of 42 years old person, but in that specific region, I can still do so, provided I have certain technical platform to do so. Third comes that big time licensing, that if I have to go for digital adoption as a company, then there are number of challenges regarding licensing. For example, if I have to supply inputs to a certain area, I need to have license at my own. If my merchants are being listed, they need to have a license, and all of them have to be very well verified, because otherwise I'm putting my neck next to a knife which can go and just cut off my head at a midnight. So that's a challenge which I see that, and that requires a much robust system, clean awareness upon the micro entrepreneurs or the local village level. This is where I see in terms of farmers, in terms of the micro entrepreneurs about them.
Thank you, Nikhil. I think you brought out the most provocative challenges, and I saw all the panel members smiling at your last point, right? I think very helpful sort of thought process, right? We need to bring the cost of digital down, and we need to ensure that the technology is easy enough for us to drive adoption for the target segment, which is farmers, a 41-year farmer who perhaps is not as well versed with a mobile platform and the user interfaces that we are, right? I think moving on, since morning we've been discussing the contours of ONDC, right? And how a solution like ONDC can actually create a lot of enablement in this space, right? By bringing the network together, by making it easy for buyers and sellers to come together, and many such services, right? If you take that as as the context, and then the context of agri-specific challenges that we are discussing, what could be some of the most promising aspects of ONDC solution which can really unlock value when it comes to digital penetration in agriculture? Anyone feel free to start. We don't have to start from that order, so let's have the youngest member start this time.
With the past challenges which you mentioned that, and knowing that a lot of the farmers at the background level may have burned fingers or may not have a good experience in terms of whenever the digital services is being put next to them. They are not being able to realize that this is a real value prop. In that case, to start with, I wouldn't touch upon the pointers of output or input because they require way more network and groundwork. I would like to say that to start with, insurance is one segment as a service which doesn't require licensing. B part, which requires a great technical data stack for it to be included. And third part, it requires just awareness. All of those three things could be imparted without the much adoption of the other stakeholders. We see that India, 56% of our regions are prone of thermal stress, drought, floods. Wherever if you talk about government insurance, so that covers, yes, the major crops, but not the minor crops. And hence there is a deficit. And this industry is being also from a private standpoint of view, it's been growing at a rate of around 27 to 28% year on year as a private insurance. So that is the layer where I see that farmer can have a real benefit coming out to them without much dependencies, and that's where ONDC can play a bigger role into getting the village level entrepreneurs to register themselves as a demand aggregator and the farmers to be able to see all the products and choose wisely. So this is something which I see that low cost, low effort, high confidence and high return to start with.
Great idea, Nikhil.
See, I think one of the, we all know that agri as a space is a space where the margins are very less. Most of the players, if you see in the agri value chain, they operate on single digit kind of margins. So one unlocks that ONDC kind of a tech platform can do is on the velocity side. Because finally that's the other dimension for any business, right? That how fast can any player rotate the capital. And I think that's a big unlock that a player like, or a platform like ONDC can do. One other piece which I see as a need, right? If you look at it from a farmer's perspective, insurance is what he talked about, and I agree that that's a big underserved need. The other one, if you see, is lot of access to formal credit, right? It's collateralized for a farmer, right? Which is not the case for you and me, right? We get a lot of loan calls, every day. Nobody is asking for a collateral before they are giving out a loan to us, right? A cash flow based credit is also what gets unlocked through a platform like ONDC, right? That and that again for a farmer, if you see, a lot of things for him today are bundled. Right, if he wants to buy inputs, input is not just input, but input is often bundled with credit. So a retailer sells him input on credit, but then that increases his cost. The retailer also then dictates what is he purchasing. He may also tag on some inputs which may or may not be needed by him, right? So for a farmer, many things get bundled. So that is a possibility to unbundle. And a cash flow based credit for a farmer, it's I think one of the unlocks also possible.
I'm going to agree with my panelists on where the value is, but I just want to add a couple of things. One, while the existing incumbents are going to benefit from ONDC from a velocity point of view, I think what would be huge value for agriculture itself is local entrepreneurship that is building on top of ONDC. So can we create context-aware entrepreneurs in local settings that have the trust, the contextual understanding and the engagement with the community that can thrive on an infrastructure like ONDC that reduces their setup costs? I feel is going to be a big win, and there I would agree that, he talked about village level entrepreneurs, to really think of what is the resource stack that we need beyond just online, on the ground, to make it happen, I think is a very important imagination that I think has to be driven. Because once done, and in the previous panel they spoke about job losses, I think the job creation value is actually going to enable through democratized and decentralized entrepreneurship. So I think that's one important value unlock that I think is critical. Then there is network effects that can enable through this. That's number one. The second, I agree that access to credit, access to insurance, both any access to financial instruments. And I think the important thing to nuance there, which I think is a tricky question for all of us, is a farmer is also a rural person. Their finances for farming versus other aspects of their lives are linked. So thinking about effective and contextual financial products, I think is also important. I think it came up in the last panel as well. There's a lot of top-down product creation as one type product. I feel ONDC will enable you to do effective, customized, localized product creation for financing needs of farmers that actually could be very, very interesting, and can enable greater demand. Yeah? I'll pause there.
So I'm going to start with the response first. Yes, agriculture inputs do require a lot of licensing, a lot of regulation. But there's a logic to it. If you're selling seeds as a certified seed, and for something like a crop, you'll know immediately if it doesn't germinate, but something like papaya will come to the fruiting stage after a year and a half, then you will not be able to find out who sold it to you. So in a situation like this, the idea, yes, often is to do a little bit of business process engineering when you go in digital, but with ONDC there is an advantage that people who are already with those registrations can go online and sell directly, so that, yes, what was mentioned, there's this intrinsic linkage between credit and agri inputs that gets broken. I'll give an instance. There are 3 sellers on ONDC which are different central seed farms of National Seed Corporation. So they are offering everything from certified paddy seed to certified millet seed to small vegetable kits priced at something like a 125 a piece. So there has been zero advertisement of these products going online so far. The reason behind the zero advertisement was they were not very sure about the logistic partners, whether they will deliver to far off areas. And when I had asked about 15 days ago, after 1 month of them going live, they'd already got $85.
Wow.
So this is somebody just going on the site and seeing it and placing an order. So it is making life of the farmer easier. He's not dependent on his local, whosoever is his local person who has the stronghold over the seeds. The second part of it is nothing succeeds like success. Anything which eliminates, this is for all digital platforms, anything which eliminates the layers which get added to our pricing from the producer to the end consumer is what is going to make it work. So I am going to cite figures here. We have a platform which is the wholesale agri platform, the National E-Market. National E-Market, hopefully we will integrate with ONDC because it's wholesale trade in only agri-produce. So compared with 21-22 to 22-23, I would say interstate trade in 21-22 in the entire fiscal was 2.7 crores, which in 1 year jumped to 373.9 crores.
Wow.
So this is just because we are ready with what was lacking earlier. The mechanisms to pay digitally, to track whether your truck has left or it has not left, to have it graded at the source. So this is interstate trade. Yes, it's still 373.9, which by itself is not an impressive figure. But then one has to remember that what was sold were low-cost items like apples, like quinoa, like potatoes. So if these are trading interstate and they're trading digitally, where the payments are online, then the farmer is getting his payment the same day. That is the condition of payment, and only then the dispatches happen. inter-mandi trade, which is again digital, because you're sitting in a different vicinity and ordering and making a bid on the national e-market electronically. That jumped up from 368 to 723 crores. This is a 90% increase over 1 year. E-payments has jumped up. The trade value is up on ENAM by 32%. It is almost 75,000 crores.
Wow.
So it is just an enablement. If traders in Jharkhand have bought apples from J&K online, we've had 16 trades of saffron all from J&K, Pulwama Mandi to all across the country.
Amazing.
And since saffron is a denotified commodity, anybody can register as a trader and buy it. You can buy 5 grams of GI tag certified saffron anywhere. You just have to give your name and your phone number and your address. So if this is possible for something which we don't even consume every day, then it is definitely possible for staples which we eat every day. But the thing is, it has to happen once and then we'll take off.
Right. Very encouraging thoughts actually, Dr. Maninder, right? And it's amazing to see, you know, the journey which is already being demonstrated, right, in many of these pilots. I'll still call it pilots because it can become a lot bigger given the scale of the agri-industry, but it's good to see that there's already signs of success across ENAM, across many of the AgTech startups, right? Dehat also comes in that, Mars, IDC Mars, many such startups, right? So great suggestions, many ideas, credit, insurance, village level entrepreneurs, enablement of the village level trade, right? All great ideas. I think the next question, right, which emerges naturally from this conversation is that ONDC is still getting set up, right, and it's still in that sort of stage where it will go through its own, you know, version 2.0, 3.0, etc. If you were to give one suggestion, right, you know, as industry, what kind of support you would like from ONDC to truly make this a moment of, you know, truth and a you know, true inflection point in the agriculture sector, what would that suggestion be? Maybe just one suggestion, right, for ONDC. Let's start with Dr. Maninder this time.
It's going to be one split into two.
Okay, sure.
First is instant payment.
Yeah.
So we've seen cases of farmer-producer organizations who are trading with big houses and they still want to go on ENAM and they say because we don't want to operate on credit. We want payment today. It's cash in hand, will drive any platform. We don't think twice before we use our card on Amazon, for instance.
Yeah.
And second part of it is, from the consumer perspective, the traceability of it. I'm going to digress a little. If anybody was buying handlooms online, you will not go to Amazon or Flipkart. You'll go to a place like Goku, because there you know you are actually buying a handloom and they check that it is an authentic hand-woven or hand-spun or whatever they're claiming to be. So if we are talking about niche foods, and India has a whole lot of them. We have, in any given time, about 7,000 varieties of rice which are grown across the country, across seasons. These are all varieties which are distinct, which are different. I have personally listed at least 28 varieties of honey, which are not the factory honey. This is the raw honey. Some of them are already on ONDC. So we go to foreign countries, we talk about the sticky rice which we ate or the jasmine rice. We have mind-blowing variety in this country here. So somewhere where it talks about what the product is, there are almost 150 GI tagged agri-produce which are available with farmers who produce it, some in limited quantities and some in very large quantities. And it's a chicken and egg story. Once they start getting traction, their productivity will go up. They will invest in agri-tech, in machinery, in everything. So if this visibility, along with instant payment the same day, I don't think there's anything to stop it after.
Very fair suggestions. Thank you.
I'm going to build on my earlier answer. So the first thing, so I'm talking on behalf of the Agri Collaboratory, of which I'm a core member, where we stand for the interest of small-size farmers, and not from an industry lens, but from a farmer lens. I think the first thing that that would be an expectation from ONDC is to be able to address unseen barriers that might keep the farmers out. And for me, one of the critical things here is data, right? We talked about credit, we talked about others. There might be an intent to provide that product, but there are gaps in the access to public data that might disable them to be able to achieve it. And then a conscious focus on those challenges in terms of data, etc., I think would be very, very critical. And the second is a lot, I mean, the magic of ONDC really is going to be unlocked by the entrepreneurs that are going to be on it. And a conscious effort, like I said earlier, to promote local entrepreneurship in context and not just the Bombay, Delhi entrepreneurs, I think is going to be very, very important for us to unlock greater value.
Thank you.
Just building on some of these points, see the scale, I mean we all, and Nitika you also referred to, that the scale possible here is mind-blowing, right? Lakhs of tons is what can be traded and is today also traded. Somehow it's getting traded physically, and a lot of intermediaries today solve that problem of trust. Trust something is and if you like decipher this trust, essentially it's on two pieces, right? One is the payment, right? And the other element of trust is quality. Like today, the produce is not a product yet, because wheat is wheat, but what quality of wheat, right? That is the issue of trust, which is why you need intermediaries. So somewhere that productization is a big unlock towards lakhs of tons, right? And for productization, I think in many other areas we have been able to set clear standards which are, so to say, universally followed in India. Everybody understands it that way. On the agri-produce, we are still some way away. When I see, and I think I was just reflecting that the viewpoint, anybody who's building a business always sees the glass half full, right? So I see a lot of solutions also today are there, which are able to, through visual algorithms, etc., they are able to take, grade and tell a quality of the wheat or a rice or so on, right? But there again, every solution has its own standard, so they are not interoperable in some sense, right? So today, one way which ONDC can be a partner to that is this productization of produce. If we can have these interoperable standards on at least some of the main commodities in India, we have huge variety of, and like you were referring to, like if you look at the long tail, it's just mind-blowing. But some of the main commodities which are not that complex, if we are able to have some standards which are acknowledged, respected and followed across the country, I think that will be a huge unlock, because then you know what you are buying. Today, many times the intermediary is only there to say, okay, this is the quality, I have checked it myself and hence I am buying it. So every stage you have an intermediary who's mainly doing this. So that produce to product, if we can unlock, I think that's a game changer.
Great idea.
Wait, so first to just put across that, there have been massive and great developments into agri-tech sector from all the sides, be it be government data and approaches, be it be ENAM, all of them has showcased that this thing is doable. So first of all, that agriculture is not all lagging to be a right participant for ONDC to be picked up. That's very much clear, and I would say that all my panelists will agree with this fact. Now coming that, what are the things? So I would say Dr. Maninder and Rahul sir covered very well that what it requires for a wheat to become a product, and that positioning is very much important. And apart from that, from a ground level, what is already being covered, like the two factors. Coincidentally I don't have any three. But the two things, that one thing is interoperability between the agri data stack which is in building. If ONDC achieves that, we shall be able to make 1 + 1 = 11. That's one, and which will solve the technical barrier. Second part is ONDC must, should, and has the potential to unlock various different service providers and employment opportunities on the ground. Be it be village level entrepreneurs, mobile entrepreneurs who can collect demand on soil testing, drone spraying, or be it be getting a KYC being registered, be it be customer hiring centers, be it be even packaging as a service. That's an area where it is still being unaddressed by all of our joint efforts, and that's a massive area where having a platform like ONDC with all the due support from everybody coming in, if you're able to crack this up, this is going to add a real wow moment for all of us.
Very thoughtful suggestions. I think, productization, interoperability, payments, traceability, right? I think very thoughtful suggestions for, for this platform to reflect on. I think moving on, one of the things which will truly make this, a moment of sort of truth, right, in the industry is when different players come together, right? This kind of a platform will only be successful if, if we have the industry kind of coming together. It's not one person's doing here. So if I were to ask, what is the one call to action, right, that you will give to the industry to really make this a successful and for the industry to come together, what would that be? Any thoughts?
So I just have one thought, maybe panelists will have a way better thought. From our side, that we see that already agriculture is an ecosystem. All of us work in a very much conjunction with each other. Like, currently, if I speak about from the Dehat standpoint of view, we have been into working with each of us, participants over here, majority of them. So in that case, there is a collaborative effort which is being there. And again, thank to all the work which is being done by the right people in the past 5 years. So this, getting that onboarded, where the platform itself should ensure the data privacy, what is to be given. If that part is being solved, because that is going to be the major question from all of the participants. Apart from that, any supply chain for getting the crop from a farmer to the last life, it requires all the stakeholder participants to work in conjunction with each other. So that is fairly established. It just requires the platform to establish that data is being private. All those malfunctioning is being recorded, and as Madam suggested that having a layer of a pre-license approval approach is going to safeguard our interests in our business approaches.
Yeah, I think I'll wholeheartedly second what the young panelists said. That, I think I've seen 4 different industries over the career, and my one observation is that this agri is one space where inherently it is well suited for collaboration and partnership. Because the ecosystem is so complex, every player realizes that you can't do it alone. And everybody brings something on table, there's a lot of complementarity possible. So I think a platform kind of a thing comes very naturally to agri space. That collaboration, a partnership, if there's a player who's bringing something specific of value and they are getting connected into a value chain, I think it comes naturally. And I also would agree with the second point, that somewhere I think the work TAC is doing on building that agri stack, I think that is going to be very fundamental, because today everybody is building their own islands of data, and those islands don't speak to each other, and everybody specifically on the data side is reinventing the wheel. So I think that unlock, if it happens, then like he said, 1 + 1 = 11 is very doable.
Fully agree. I have very little to add, so I'll just keep it very brief. I think the covenants of governance that we have to establish. I think we talked about risk and risk management. I think right from the start, establishing the governance of risk that can also cover any of the data sharing aspects, I think will be critical, because that is honestly where the accrued value is very, very high. Rather than everybody building it on their own, if there is an approach that we are sort of championing around building a common stack, can be enabled with the appropriate governance that reduces any barriers of entry for other players in the future, I think that will be the best thing that we can do.
So other than what is agri stack is work in progress, but ONDC is also up and running. So my only unlock suggestion would be, please start trading in volumes. Agriculture is where the margins are in the volume. So yes, we are pushing FPOs to onboard with your finished product. It's important because it increases local livelihoods, it creates local jobs. But the real turnaround will happen with volumes. So it has to be a B2B. Like ideally something like yesterday, but as early as possible. Otherwise it's not going to crack this sector. Because say if I was a weaver, I can keep my sarees for 6 months if I'm not getting the right price. If I'm an artisan, I can hold on to it. You cannot hold on to agri-produce without a certain degradation. So the B2B has to be enabled faster than the
B2C.
packaged finished product.
Right. Thank you. So start participating. I think that's the call to action to the industry, but it's also refreshing to hear from most of the panel members that the collaboration is actually not an issue and it's kind of naturally happening, which is very refreshing to hear. Right? used to hear a different perspective maybe 10 years ago in this industry. So it's very refreshing to hear that the collaboration is more and more, and it's increasing with all these platforms coming up. I'm going to get to the last question, and this is a rapid fire, very quick answer. And this is basically agriculture and digital. We're talking about these two topics, and we are seeing a lot of young entrepreneurs coming into this. What is the one advice that you would like to give to the young entrepreneurs who are coming into agriculture using digital or without digital? You know, both ways. Rapid fire question.
Young entrepreneurs in agriculture, the farmer knows a lot. I mean, talk to him, but also listen to what he's saying.
Amazing.
Start from the ground, work upwards.
Superb.
I think probably a different paraphrasing of that fall in love with the consumer, not with the tech.
Very cool.
Again, the same thing. If you have question what to build, go to Azadpur Mandi. Spend a day and then see that, okay, that's going to be your office for the 3 months. And you shall definitely come with a very frugal entrepreneur.
Great set of advice. Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to all of you. Thank you for taking our time for this panel discussion. The very refreshing ideas around how can digital unlock the value in agriculture and how can ONDC play a role in this journey, but also overall how can industry play a role in this journey. So thank you again for taking our time for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the panel members for coming here for the panel discussion. And to facilitate all the panel members, I would like to call on stage Mr. Rahul Handa. Please come on the stage. Can we have a huge round of applause for all the people and Mr. Rahul? Let's give them a huge round of applause, everyone. Tools ordered on ONDC from first time digitized seller. Thank you so much once again to all the members. So, well, have you ever wondered how much insurance is? Educate insurance. So we now march towards our final panel discussion for the day, building on momentum, ensuring the uninsured commercial transactions. To discuss crucial topic, we have a lineup of industry experts and leaders. Please allow me to introduce you to them. Our first panelist is Asit Raj, Chief Executive Officer from Aviva India. Let's give him a huge round of applause, everyone. All the people out there. Can we have a huge round of applause? Followed by Mr. Indranil Chatterjee, co-founder from Renew. We also have Mr. Anuj Gulati, Chief Executive Officer from Air Health Insurance. Next on the list we have Mr. Ankit Agarwal, Chief Executive Officer from Insurance Neko. Also joining us is Mr. Chitti Babu, Chief Information Officer from Star Health. Next panelist is Mr. Naveen Charuwadi, Chief Digital Officer from Yes Bank. And to moderate this session, may I call upon on stage our moderator, Mr. Sandeep Kumar, partner, Oliver Wyman. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a huge round of applause. The stage is all yours.
Yeah, sorry, it's a afternoon session. Typically, but you still, I think, the whole purpose is to really get some of the perspectives around how to really leverage a platform like ONDC to achieve the aspiration of taking insurance to every doorstep and covering every Indian. So I'll maybe start no, in no particular order, but let me start with Asid, with you on the life insurance or in general insurance. So insurance industry has been considered a very important industry, but at the same time not very at the forefront of digitization, or let's say the digital revolution that some of the other industries has really seen, right, in India or as well as globally. The whole premise of ONDC is to really use digital as a tool to actually take insurance to create insurance proposition for every Indian and then to take it to every doorstep to every Indian. How do you see life insurance in the context of, historically being laggard in the insurance? How do you see that changing over the period of next 5 to 10 years?
So I think life insurance got privatized in 2000, and over the 20 years, if you look at all the players together, we have operated mostly in India. Okay, so we haven't really been able to reach Bharat. And what we saw, at least I was not in India at that point when COVID hit, was that even despite the size of our economy, we were not able to take care of all our people for just 6 months. So insurance is a very, very important key that will unlock the new vision that a powerful India, inclusive India. And the IIDA also is talking about 2027 or 2047 rather, which is accelerated to 2027 now, where insurance for all should be made possible. Now, why is insurance for all not possible at this point of time? Because you don't find the right distribution. You don't find the right means to go. And the more you go towards the vulnerable segment, the pricing keeps increasing, which is counterintuitive. It has to go the other way around. The poorer the customer, the most vulnerable they are. And then you have to find innovative distribution to be able to reach them at the right price. And what ONDC and other Digital India stack is going to together help us is to be able to underwrite at scale. There is no other fear. Otherwise, everybody is aware of health insurance. Everybody is aware of critical illnesses. What can be the cost if someone in COVID got to an ICU and so on and so forth. So the awareness levels are very high, at least on the protection side of health and protection kind of products. And that's where we need to cover almost all of India. So I think ONDC is a great network. It will leave digital trails. It will allow us to be present. It will allow us to be creating very, very fair, transparent, products. And the recent regulations, including sandbox, etc., that's getting pushed, and the new capital regime is all good news for how the future holds for insurance in India. And ONDC will be, I think, a very critical cog in the wheel.
Thank you. Anuj, I think just taking the extension to you from, just continuing with the manufacturer story. Do you, just a corollary to this question, while this is a good ambition to have, that insurance for everyone, but you have been in this business for some time now, you have built the business from scratch. Do you think this is a too bold an aspiration to have, and will it be viable in the construct that we are operating, the country that we have, and is digital really the solution to meet that aspiration?
Thank you. Thank you, ONDC, for having us here today. I think we are having this discussion at a very opportune time. At one end, I think we all trust the government has established a set of digital assets, tools, which we've all been using and we believe in. Call it the UPI, call it multiple other, the DigiLocker, the DigiYatra. I mean, we can go on and on. It's helping all of us in our daily lives. On the other side, we have a very proactive insurance regulator who proactively is coming forward and saying, we want to cover every Indian. We want to go across every spectrum. In the last 1 year, we do not need to go to the regulator anymore, for example, to design new products. They've opened up distribution. They've enabled opening up of distribution even further. They are talking about building, for example, a Bima Sugam, which is a digital platform to enable commerce for customers to come in and be able to buy. They are, to build further trust with consumer, they are launching the Bima Bharosa, right? The whole grievance management system and so on and so forth. So like Asit just mentioned, access to market, access to low ticket, access to Bharat, rural India, so on and so forth, becomes extremely important. And I think that's where a platform like ONDC could further help us. Allowing for commerce at very low cost, allowing for access for our products, allowing for, so it's an open, I mean, insurance, all of insurance is about being able to understand and hence being able to price risk. And the fact that all of these digital tools are available, data is available, it helps us to be able to customize and target products for the consumer, which takes unnecessary inertia, friction cost, even helps us, so to say, price risk better, right? And some of that, those benefits will certainly get passed on to the consumer. It will enable further bundling. Whether it is a loan, if the consumer, the primary purchase is the two-wheeler, it will allow for the insurance attachment to happen. If it's a television set, it will allow for an extended warranty to be attached. The fact that under the NHA we are talking about a digital health record for every Indian will give us more information, will help us price that risk better, will help weed out fraud and help make it more accessible, easier for consumers to buy. So I think what COVID taught us, I think one of the few categories of products which even in April to June 2020, when all of India had shut down, but grew was health insurance, life insurance, some of our products. What we offer is a promise to pay to the consumer. We don't have to deliver a physical product, right? Even so, we've all been digitally enabled forever. I think the customer adoption, we obviously had to fine tune our processes. We all learned a lot through that process, right? And I think those learnings, we've been able to build on those learnings over the last couple of years. And now with platforms like this, I have no doubt that as we think through the future, we will have our ability to be able to make it much easier for every segment of consumer to be able to get access to insurance products. Right? We should be able to enable that.
Yeah. No, thanks. This is really, really very helpful, and I think it resonates very well, at least with the motive and ambition with which ONDC is also, or any platform is really working right now. Ankit, would be good to hear, how do you see this from the distributor side? I think the whole evolution of InsurTech in India was distributor-led, and the promise was digital. Now, how do you see this going forward? Like, you see things are getting easier, more challenging. I mean, how do you see this whole landscape over the next 5 to 10 years from the distributor perspective?
So I keep telling my team and everybody that I talk to that insurance is at the same space today where fintech was in 2015, right? And insurance for the longest possible time was waiting for its own UPI moment. When the honorable regulator announced that they are going to launch Bima Sugam, the hope within the insurance industry was that Bima Sugam is the UPI movement for the industry. I think ONDC takes care of the sourcing side of Bima Sugam, right? Because it overnight, it creates a frictionless distribution platform through which you have access to millions and millions of people in real Bharat, and it brilliantly ties up with the goal which the entire insurance distribution and manufacturing industry today is chasing, that is insurance for all by 2047. What I firmly believe that ONDC will lead to 3 different kinds of innovation. One is going to be on the product designing part. Given that use and file is now allowed, manufacturers will work with distributors on creating product for real Bharat, right? Frictionless, simple, easy to understand products which can be sold in hinterland without any friction. Second, it will aid in further digitization of the entire sourcing stack. As more and more companies integrate with the entire Bharat stack around NHDM, around UPI payment, etc., sourcing will start becoming frictionless. Third, the prevalence of buying instantaneous covers or covers which you only need for a small period of time, like vector-borne diseases, like dengue covers, etc., will increase. Lastly, I think if we are able to layer this very, very strongly with the overall RTO databases across the country, we might actually be able to push for insuring more vehicles, right? Today, about 50% of the vehicles which run in the country are underinsured or non-insured. So you'll be able to solve for that. That's my thought process.
Yeah. No, I think this is a great insight, and I think if the common theme, at least if I hear all 3 of you emerging, is there is this hope around that it is the right time, because the timing is really important. Second thing which is clearly emerging is the simplification and the ease of access to the large pool of customers. And then the third thing which is clearly emerging is this whole frictionless, low-cost distribution model, which you all believe is going to really make a lot of difference. So I mean, a couple of taking it, Naveen, from you, a question just on the one of the learning we can have, and then I'll come to you, Chitti Babu, as well, is one distributor which was supposed to be very lot more digitally ahead in the curve, and I think Ankit also alluded, was the banks, right, like on the fintech side. However, when we see the insurance distribution of banks via the digital banker, it is still non-existent at best, right? I mean, if I use the harsh little bit word. Is there any learning there that can be used? Why banks have not been able to distribute insurance digitally? What is holding them back, and if there are learnings there?
Yeah, so firstly, I think before I come to answer that, this ONDC as a concept will definitely help us to have a network effect, and we at Yes Bank have been the biggest beneficiary of the results of network effects. I was just mentioning to Anuj before we walked in that for a 0.5% bank which is having only 1,000 branches with among the 200,000 branches that exist in the country, we currently hold about 30% plus market share on UPI or 20% plus market share on various payment products, which is micro ATMs or AEPS. That's all happened because we have partnered with networks, whether it is a digital network or it's a physical network, and we have been able to leverage that particular network benefits into our regular business. Now, how this has happened? Because we have understood that technology can take this transaction to the last mile. So if a person has to deposit cash into a bank account, right, in an area where there is absolutely no ATM, no branch, we have figured out a model where a BC network can be utilized to do a transaction at a cost which is affordable to the customer, which also brings in revenue to the BC agent who is actually servicing the customer, plus also helps the bank to retain certain revenue and run these operations. We have been doing this for last 10 years. How is it possible? It's only possible because we have been able to leverage technology. The technology can take transactions at scale even to the last mile. Why insurance has not happened? Insurance definitely is one of the options which was definitely sought after during various interactions in our channels. But I think we will also have to understand that when we are currently at this point of time, without ONDC being in place, we are bound by some bank assurance rules, and we also have to, if we have to digitally enable, we also have to have a ISPN license. All of that is something which at this point of time, when you look at the traditional branch channel which is sourcing insurance through various campaigns that are there, at this point of time, I think that is not our primary business. Also, it's a third party business. If you want to talk it as a banking language, it's always called as a third party products. So obviously bank would be focused on core products using the physical distribution channel more than the non-core products, and the non-core products can happen only on digital world. Digital world, we'll definitely have to understand that because of the banca rules, we may be forced to change from one insurance company to another insurance company as part of the overall strategy of the bank or overall negotiations that happens between the bank's management and the insurance management. So all these things are some of those limitations probably where banks have not invested in the right tech connect with the insurance companies so far. It's always a redirection page, or at max it is a handover on a SFTP or a file based where it's a drop on floor today and you get an answer tomorrow. That's what we have done as a banks. Most of the banks are doing like that. But with InsurTech being in place for last 4 years, I think that because of the banca rules, we have not been able to progress well. However, I think this ONDC will help us, provided RBI also takes note of this and allows banks to distribute in all service provider plans to the customers. That is when we'll be able to see success. And here, not just insurance, as a banking world, if we have to contribute well in the ONDC framework, we'll also have to review the para-banking guidelines that exist today. Para-banking guidelines have some expectations in terms of what are the do's and don'ts from the banking world. Right now, we'll also have to probably see how RBI and ONDC will come together to review those guidelines so that this distribution capabilities of the banks can be leveraged not only by insurance but various other participants on the ONDC network.
No, thank you, and I think some of the regulatory challenges and the constraints that you have highlighted has been very well known. So Chiti Babu, I think you have spent a lot of your time outside the insurance industry, right, in your career. Would be good to hear from you where you think some of the learnings can be drawn for insurance, whether it is health insurance or life insurance or GI, doesn't matter, but where you think that some of the innovative ideas, thinking can come that will help this industry push the digital agenda forward.
Absolutely. In fact, just taking a cue from what Ankit mentioned, he mentioned insurance is in the space where fintech was in 2015. If I can just even rewind back, we keep saying ONDC's UPI. In fact, one thing proudly we talk around the world in all social media is UPI, right? And if I ask anyone in this room or anywhere, which is the biggest turning point for the Indian payments fintech, I guess everybody will say Demon. But actually, if you go back a decade back, is when the regulator RBI came and said for all online transactions, second factor authentication is a must. In the common man's world, we call it OTP. Imagine going to any Indian in the late 90s or early 2000, telling you need to put your 16-digit credit card number on a web page. Everybody will laugh at you, right? And that one decision changed the e-commerce industry in India. Because whatever you see of Flipkart, Amazon, IRCTs of the world started with that one decision. In fact, for me, that's the first turning point in the payments fintech world, which obviously Demon is a watershed movement. COVID, we are able to navigate pretty smoothly because of it. So I just want to highlight that point, and I see that adding to Anuj's point, IRD has been extremely proactive on that level. I'm new to the insurance industry. I'm still taking my baby steps over there, and I see that a lot more openness is happening, what we've not seen in the last 27 years. Now coming back to it again, if I can give a practical example, again sticking to payments fintech and how we can read. I've traveled extensively in Africa, and for the longest time, even before the advent of Alipay or UPI, the only example of mobile payments was in Africa, right? And if you think about it, they never had smartphone. They had what we call the off-brick phone, right? And 98% of Africa didn't have electricity. Yeah, and I've seen personally, how they do it. They go to a city fair on a Saturday, Sunday. pay the shop owner for electricity charges, charge the phone. And the charge will last for the next 5 days. And the entire payment scheme happens to that brick phone on a rudimentary model called USSD. Right? That was the only case study of payments anywhere in the world for a very, very long time. So what I want to say is that a lot of combination of basics, technology, fintech will come together. Like what Ankit has done at Insurance Deco is like a, something we all should salute and try to adapt. And coming back to ONDC, I believe, again, UPI is successful because everybody came together. Right? And I guess ONDC again a platform, I guess all of us can come together, what we call co-opt, compete, cooperate. Right? And we can compete at some places, but we have a 1 billion lives to cover. So there is a space for all of us, even for the next 25 years. And where I see ONDC, like we are a manufacturer as well as a distributor. So if in a ONDC platform, it gives access to everyone to everything, including financial services and insurance. It means I can spend more time in designing something, a customized product, than currently what is offered off the shelf. Right? So I can spend more time in R&D. I can spend more time in probably predicting some disease cycle, right? That would come out, working with the hospital and network, can create a health and wellness program around it, and let the ONDC take care of the distribution. And 5G is on us, and Mr. Goyal was mentioning how 6G is already in the talk. So it means technology is there. We're going to have probably every nook and corner somebody who's holding a smartphone, right, with the latest 6G technology. It means distribution may not be my worry anymore. I may want to probably focus on the way I process my claim, my customer expectation, the journey that I give for my customer. So I can more focus on those futuristic technology innovation side. I will just, before I pass the mic to my co-panelists, I want to give one example. So I used to be with MasterCard managing multiple regions. There's a card product that we launched in GCC region around 2012, 2013. And at that time, we didn't have a mobile phone, you didn't have Compass on the phone. And we were saying that, okay, there are 12 issuers. How do I make my card to come out of the customer wallet more often? And somebody gave an idea of putting a compass on a plastic. And the compass points to Mecca. The 90% of the population, prays 5 times a year, they want to know where Mecca is. So what happened, people started pulling up the wallet, right? Every time they need to pray. And the compass points to Mecca and they know that's the direction, right? And that become capturing the heart, mind and wallet of the customer. So there is a lot of scope for innovation on insurance product, and I guess ONDC allows that flexibility as we plug along in a large way.
Yeah, no, thank you. And this is great point that you made, right? Like around drawing inspiration from other industries, from MasterCard, or for that matter, like the watershed moment in the payment industry, the 2-point authentication you talked about. I remember that was indeed a point when customers started trusting it. That even if my card gets swiped, unless I put the OTP, nobody will be able to transact it. And that comfort, that peace of mind was very, very important. Anuj, I want to ask you your thoughts on one question, which is taking this little bit further ahead. Of course, ONDC is going to, or ONDC type of platforms might be solving a large part of the distribution eventually, some point of time. But to make this whole thing happen, we also need to innovate on the propositions, on the product side, on meeting the latent demand. Sometimes even a customer cannot articulate what she needs, right? Who our default customers are, many a times, we don't really know. How do you see insurance companies evolving, especially the health insurance companies? And why I'm saying the health insurance companies is that we see world over, this is one line of business in insurance which is closer to a pull product in a way, because people need it. No government can continue funding the healthcare even when there are universal healthcare programs. So eventually private health insurance is necessary. Also, insurers have been thinking about moving from a reactive payer to a more of a partner model on the healthcare journey. But in India, we still see health insurance on a very traditional reactive claim payout company. I mean, with of course some differentiation. How do you see that changing? Because that has to change if this dream has to be realized.
Let's look at the macro. lakh crore rupees a year in healthcare. Health insurance this year will be about 97,000 crores. So we're about 10, 11, 12% of all healthcare spend as a financing solution. Extreme example, if you take the United States of America, about 80-85% of all healthcare spend comes through is financed through health insurance, private health insurance. Right? So that's the option. Right? Every time, in my view, the moment there is demand, product innovation happens, financing solutions will always come up. What ONDC does is creates access to the end consumer. What the regulator again has done is, from a product standpoint, as I mentioned, they've completely freed up. Right? They have allowed us to be able to innovate. They have done things like pilot products where we could go out, innovate, take risk, basis the learnings, be able to, in a very short time frame, be able to fine tune the product and take it back into the market and consumer to make it more viable, so on and so forth. I think the fact that there is so much data available, like I mentioned earlier, doctor consultations, diagnostics, that level of data becoming available, helping you to be able to customize and make available a product for almost every healthcare need that the consumer has. Right? The moment we're able to do some of that, I don't think supply side will be the issue.
Okay.
In my view, the moment we're able to, the consumer has a demand, has a need, is using healthcare, think of us as a financing solution. And our ability to be able to finance every transaction. And what we've been looking for is a platform which is more digitally enabled, which is transparent, so that we can catch fraud or we can weed out fraud. The moment we can weed out fraud, we are able to finance that solution. Think of it like that.
Okay. No, that's a very interesting take, that you are saying that where there is demand, the supply will follow. It's not, supply side has not been a constraint, because you are now a lot more flexible in terms of what you can bring to a customer if you have access to a frictionless access to a really customer, right? So Ankit, anything you want to add?
I was going to add, Ayushman Bharat, when the program has been taken into the back, districts where there has been almost no healthcare facility available. The moment there was financing available, we saw doctors from urban India move back to their home district, set up a 10-15 bedded facility because there was patient flow. So supply followed. And it follows very quickly. And good quality care follows. Right? So we've seen that firsthand, and which is why I can say from experience that the moment, and in this case specifically, because just given the number of segments, sub-segments in India, if we are able to solve for frictionless product delivery, demand is there, supply will follow.
Yeah. No, the very interesting thought. In fact, a lot of industries evolve like that. And it sometimes people might say, Ankit, taking this question to you, it's a chicken and egg, which came first, chicken or whatever egg. But little bit like, being provocative here, but one could argue that, let's say, airlines industry, right? It is the 1 rupee air ticket brought by Deccan that created the demand, and then of course the supply really followed. But how do you see that? I mean, because you work with the different insurance companies, do you see industry really also innovating on creating demand, like really bringing this thing to the customer where they think that they can really access it, they need it, they need to buy it?
Absolutely. You will have to understand that this is the industry which during the 2 COVID waves, and Anuj, correct me if I'm wrong, settled claims upwards of 20,000 odd crores. Right? So this is the industry which helped settle that. This is the industry which launched a cover, COVID specific cover, COVID Suraksha, and in spite of knowing that it is peak COVID time and claims are bound to happen. So this industry has always stepped up whenever there's been a need, both from a regulatory perspective as well as a socio-economic or socio-cultural perspective. Secondly, you'll have to understand this is an industry which is in the business of solving for risks. Right? So this industry cannot be over adventurous also.
Correct.
they are at a very this industry takes in money with a promise that in future if something goes wrong, we'll be there to help you, right? So any industry which is underwriting or doing risk management, right, has to be somewhat conservative, right? In
Correct.
spite of that, I think the industry has been able to step up, the industry has been able to change with times, and industry has been able to come up with fantastic products. Also under the new regulator, right? So under the new chairman, I think we have a very, very strong regulator, and the regulator is very, very proactive, right? And a bunch of new changes have come in. And I think the single biggest change which has come in is use and file. It just allows the industry to experiment way more freely. Earlier, a typical product would take anywhere between 3 to 9 months. Actually 9 months, right? 3 months of designing and 6 months of approval. Now end to end you can launch a product in less than 3 months. So because your ability to launch newer products has become fairly more easy, you will start seeing a lot more innovation. There's already a lot of road which is being covered, but it is only going to get accelerated. Lastly, her industry mein there is a transitioning point where technology, understanding and requirement, human requirement, all three converge. So I think insurance is at that cusp. COVID created that awareness and desire amongst people to be insured, whether it may be out of fear, it may be about something else. Regulatory framework is already solved for, and technology is also getting solved for, right? So A plus B plus C, I think the industry is getting a lot of head, and it should just keep going.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, Asit, I think the point that you made, Ankit, was quite relevant. Especially, I think the whole theme around being at the right time. This is the right timing to really go for it. And Anuj, to your point, the supply will follow if there is a demand. And for a demand to get created, the timing, the COVID has created a little bit of unfortunate moment in our life, but probably created enough demand. Asit, I mean, I know I'm also conscious of time, we will have to wrap up, but just quickly taking 1 or 2 questions from all of you. So, Asit, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is this, whole thing around, on the one hand, we talk about customer need, we talk about, like protection. 2 things we have seen major challenge. One is, the industry is still achieved the maximum growth on the back of tax benefits, right? Whether we like it, we don't like it, but the reality, right? And the second, the B2B2C play hasn't really worked. I mean, at least in whatever humble experience I have worked, and I will be very honest, I have tried, as a consultant, tried working with not just companies in India, but many other geographies. It has struggled. This whole promise of first a small ticket sale and then large ticket cross sale hasn't worked, at least in my experience. How is that going to change? I want to put both these questions. Like, if we still remain boxed on कि tax बचाने के लिए life insurance खरीदना है and B2B2C doesn't really work, how will this whole thing pan out?
See, it's a very good question from you. How many people pay tax? Will be the answer. I said we have not migrated from India to Bharat, and that's because you saw such a big, movement which happened just because of taxation, and that's exactly where the opportunity lies. I mean, if we were to exploit this entire opportunity of India being one of the largest countries and on a fantastic economic growth path, some estimates are saying that we'll have 10 out of top 50 companies in the world by 2047 coming from India. Now we have to decide how do we proceed there. So many of the B2B2C pieces have fallen because there are 3 A's to an insurance sale. One is accessibility, right? And then there is affordability. So you start from a very bite-sized dengue insurance for some dollars, and mostly it is also bundled inside some sort of a marketing funded by somebody else. So that doesn't work. You have to create the kind of awareness. The first A is you have to create compelling stories where the customer dips into their pocket and says, yes, I want this product, which has started happening in health insurance, I believe. You don't have to, and savings is equally important. So critical illnesses, for example, across Asia, makes a family fall from one economic level to another if there is somebody in the family who contracts it.
Correct.
But the total critical illness sale will be a fraction of what you sell for possibly the reimbursement products. So there is a lot that needs to be done by life and general insurers to ensure that we tell the customer what's important. You don't go bankrupt because you had to get a cataract operation. You don't go bankrupt because my daughter had to go to a dentist, but you want to go to the best cancer facility. It's serious money, even if at any level of tax pay, you will do anything and everything possible to save your near and dear ones. And that's where the entire industry and many partners that we can get in ONDC have to come together to create the right pull or right demand for the right sort of products where customers you are saying that the government cannot afford beyond a point. So which means where does the money come from? It has to come from the pocket and for relevant insurance protection, which cannot be these bite-sized products. I mean, that will not suffice.
Correct. No, I think that's interesting. Chitbabu, taking the question to you, and I think a little bit continuing, and then probably we'll wrap up is this whole thing. Are there, if we see the reality versus, again, I mean, I am also part of the community and we go and present some slides to you sharing the same thing, I mean, to be very honest. But if I look at where the revolutions has happened, let's say telecom, right? It happened when Jio made it free. Okay, if we look at some of the industries where suddenly the penetration has really gone from very low to very high, some unlock has happened. Right? What is in your view, if you look at it outside in insurance industry, what is the unlock for insurance industry? What will make it click for every Indian? Why every Indian, when every Indian will come and look for an insurance product?
Yeah, no, great question. Let me provide some context. I'll take a minute extra on this. For example, I used to travel.
Maybe this is the last question that I will ask all of you very quickly if you could respond. Yeah.
See, I mean, this is before COVID, where I used to go to Germany very often, probably 5 times in a year. And the first time I remember, I carried very less euros, but I thought it would be like US where you can pay everything digitally. And I suffered a lot, because apparently 55% of the transactions in Germany was by cash. Asking my colleagues, how was it? I mean, you guys are among the most advanced economies, most advanced countries, educated. And he was saying that, see, in US, OPM means other people's money. So they believe in credit. And in Germany, OPM means own personal money. So they believe in debit or prepaid. So that's the reason for cash. And you travel 100 kilometers upwards to Scandinavian countries, you are having 99% of the transactions was happening through digital. 1% because the tourists come with euros. And people are putting a chip on their palm to complete the transaction, because they want to be free when they get out, because they have like 3 months of summer. So, what happens that, insurance in one way has been seen as a financial transaction than a risk cover. Right? So a lot of cultural elements will come in, adding to Asit's point on awareness. If I can touch upon, the other day we were catching up as friends, and my friend's wife was saying, I wasted 18,000 rupees. I said, what happened? I did a MRI test and it came clean. Right? So it's been seen as an expense. Right? So that is where I spend some time in the mutual fund industry, where I say, invest in mutual fund, they say, I don't believe in stock market. But people did not know there are mutual fund which is related to a liquid fund which invest in backed deposits. There are debt fund, and only a small portion is equity, right? So, and again, practically say we all buy phones. Those meant for communicating, the camera resolution plays an important part, right? We buy credit cards. Those meant for transaction. The reward point what you get, or the discount if you're an airline, you travel a lot, you go for airline co-brand card. So what I mean to say is that your basic purpose is not why you're going for a product, the ancillary. So 2 things, I guess the wellness part of it will play a very, very important role when somebody buys insurance. Because if you look at 90% of the Indian women are anemic, and there is a reason why. But they don't have access to a doctor where they can talk about this and resolve. So can we work on the telemedicine platform? So we have done 3 million free consultations in the last 1 year, whether you are a Starlet customer or not. So we can bring that platform up. In fact, we all can work together, right? So if you look at every kid's birthday party is happening in a Domino's or a McDonald's or a KFC. You know what's going to happen to the kids. So can the Indian housewife wherever they are, can have access to a free diet consultation.
No, fair point. I think I got the point. The whole just that you are trying to make is that, there has to be, the unlock has to come from not the core of what you offer, but something around it which really brings the people closer
I'll just
to.
take 10 seconds, because what I'm trying to emphasize here, any product, service that we buy, the core offering is not the reason for your decision making.
Fair point. And I think that's what whole behavioral science, behavioral economics is teaching the whole world, that customers don't make rational decisions. 80% of decisions are made by our emotional and system one, what Daniel Kahneman says. Any thoughts? I mean, I will just go around the table like this, sorry, if it is okay.
This particular aspect. If we look at payments as a space, who has taught payments to the country? I think it's not the manufacturer of the payments, which is banks, but it was PhonePe, Google Pay, who are actually a third parties who are invited to participate in the UPI network, or a Paytm, which was at that point of time only a wallet company and not a payment bank. These are the companies who have actually invested and figured out how to educate customer on how the experience has to be and how the transactions can be done faster, and they have created a good awareness of the digital payments. Maybe when we have ONDC, there could be one of the buyer apps who can come up with a very innovative way of how to educate customer on the need, creating a need for insurance, and also placing it in such a fashion that customer sees this as a value and not as a tax saving scheme at some point of time. This could be an answer where none of us probably at this point of time have thought about what a third party with a new fresh perspective can bring into this ecosystem.
Asit, what will be the one unlock?
There's a lot of power in a slogan. When we were fighting for freedom, that was one. When we are fighting for India to be one of the topmost countries in the world, the insurance for all inclusivity, it will bind us together. The future will be about partnerships. We will bring in our own pieces, put it together in a way that it will become beautiful. So there will be a movement, watershed movement, when we all will start trusting each other. We'll listen to the distributor and say, okay, what do you need? In your platform, maybe this works, that doesn't, and we'll be happy to do it. And similarly, there will be collaborations which will create the watershed movement, I believe. So the 2047, 100 years insurance for all is a beautiful, beautiful slogan. I think that's the watershed movement, and it will trigger a lot of action.
Ankit, in your view, what's the unlock for the industry?
I think the biggest unlock, as he just mentioned, for any industry, does not happen when the traditional players try to make a change. It happens when newer players enter, right? And you can look at across 4 different industries.
Geo is entering.
You can look at what happened with e-commerce, right? You can look at what happened with cab industry. You can look at what happened with food delivery. So in insurance, I think we are at the right cusp, both from all 3 points which I just mentioned earlier. I think the industry just needs to learn how to coexist and co-work together. The regulatory framework is enabling that. The market is enabling that. I think you have more and more people who can now afford buying an insurance. Lastly, please understand, insurance is an industry of claim settlement, right? The more we can share about our ability to settle claims, which this industry is already doing a great job on, right? And we are able to create more friendlier products which are jargon free, right? For the common man, this industry will start to see more of an evolution point.
No, thank you. Very, very insightful. Anuj.
Well, I think enough has been said. I think the power of all of us coming together, the power of our regulator, the last few discussions we've been having with the regulator is only about how do the state governments enable us, how do we do a product called Bima Vistar for rural India, how do we get on board what are called Bima Vahaks as distribution partners on a digital platform so that we can take this to Bharat and to every village in the country. I think, and don't undermine what Naveen has been saying all through, the power of the network effect. The power of some of that coming together and feeding onto itself, I think is something that we will all, hopefully in our lifetime, see the power of it all coming together and taking us. I think the work that he is doing in powering the whole distribution framework and getting many more partners on board just because they're a digital platform and creates more employment and so on and so forth. Right? All of that together, I'm sure will take us to the next level.
No, thank you. I mean, one question from the audience, happy to take. There is, Rahul, you have a question, sorry. Okay.
I think there's some work that we've all woken up to, right? Every time you take an Ola ride, add a rupee for insurance for that ride, right? And so on and so forth. There are a large number of examples. We call it embedded insurance. You call it sachets, creating sachets out of a product, so on and so forth. I think the key being the consumer is making a primary purchase. For us to realize and accept that this would be a secondary or a tertiary product, need, hence sale, and for us to be subservient to the requirement of the primary or the secondary product and hence the transaction in that sense. Right? So that the process and technology is completely integrated into the primary purchase. Right? I think there is a realization, there is an understanding that almost all of us have around this. Right? And in my view, platforms like ONDC that you are building out will enable this at scale. Will enable this at scale. Because I think the basic thinking design of the platform is for commerce, and it kind of helps to scale this whole proposition in that sense.
Thank you. You had a question? Yes.
We have designed, there is no digital product as such. We are talking about digitalization that is only for servicing the clients, maybe a policy issuance, an endorsement, or a claim processing. There was never an effort made by the insurers also to make a digital product. Now recently, few of the companies and we also launched a product which is a meter, basically use and expiring as you use, as you pay, right? Kind of product. So tying up with ONDC and all, bigger platform, digital platform. I think we need to work upon new digital products, because till today also we are offering maybe a such product like personal accident or critical illness kind of, which is not a requirement of a customer. We have not thought of the requirement of the customer and then we push the product as a digital product. But it is not a digital product. Now only one product has come in the motor insurance. But we need to work more on that platform, and insurers have never thought of working on a new digital product. That is what.
Fair point. That's an observation. Fair point. I think there was a question at the back. Ashish or somebody. Yeah, go ahead.
First question. And second question is, insurance is probability of risk, and you have data only of a particular segment. How would you build your actuarial model if you don't have a data? I think your first question around senior citizens, if you leave aside a very small percentage, and that doesn't apply only to senior citizens, it could apply to all segments of all age groups of population. If a consumer has already been, for example, diagnosed with a certain form of cancer and we go to buy health insurance, it may be prohibitive. It is inefficient for 100,000 sum insured, if the premium is 95,000 rupees, it's not viable. One wouldn't buy it. But for otherwise, for most segments of the population, including senior citizens, there are a lot of options for products available. Now, if at that age group, data suggests that the incidence rate, which is out of every 100 customers who buy, hospitalization rates are high. For every incident of hospitalization, the number of days of hospitalization and hence the cost involved is higher, the premium will be higher. That is the risk premium, right? And that risk premium, I think there are a lot of options now available for consumers in that sense, right? So on a commercial basis, a lot of us as insurers now provide and actually actively seek senior citizen health insurance. It's becoming a large category, and don't forget, it is the largest spend in health insurance, right? So from that standpoint, it's a large opportunity for us to go after, right? Can you just repeat your second question again?
How will you underwrite? How will you do actuarial models without data?
Fortunately, again, the regulator has enabled. The regulator has enabled for what they call pilot products. See, the biggest risk we run is we run in a regime which is very consumer centric, because especially for health insurance plans, we do what is called guaranteed renewability. It's like a one-way option. The consumer can opt out. As a health insurer, I can never say no. Right? So from that standpoint, it's very consumer centric, and because of which there always used to be a fear that we go out to write a pool of risk which becomes unviable, it will be difficult for us to manage. So the regulator then, basis our request, has enabled for what we call pilot products, which is to say that it can have a sunset clause, that we could experiment, go into uncharted territory, write risk for a couple of years, 2-3 years, build a small book, allow it to cure, and basis that experience decide on what we need to fine tune and then scale up. Right? Or we could abort. We would be able to sunset. I think that is starting to, I can tell you that in each of our companies, there is significant work happening around innovation for different segments of consumers, which earlier we felt would be difficult to insure because of lack of data or perceived risk and so on and so forth. Because please don't forget, once again, these are market opportunities for us. Because there is spend. The moment there is spend, we are a financing solution. We would want to go after some of those spends in that sense.
Asit, you want to add something on this one, because this is as relevant for life side of
I think the way India as a country is progressing, there is the lack of data is something which is not going to be a problem. And as Anuj just mentioned, that you can always pilot and learn and have a sunset clause and go into uncharted territory. So you will see a lot of work happening in almost all possible spaces. Like I said, critical illness is so important. It's hardly prevalent in India. Some of us will have to take calls because there are no relevant data points available on CI incidences in certain categories and certain economic categories, not even age categories. So there will be experiments like that done by a few, and then others will of course follow. So that's the nature of our business, and it's being now promoted by the regulator through the sandbox and other experimental encouragement that is coming from their side.
Any last question or else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Plague that we have is of the lowest IRR but highest commission traditional products. Now, obviously, this product has been, every financial influencer you talk to or any decent guy you talk to will say ki mat lo, don't mix investment and insurance, but still these are sold like anything, especially during March. So, is it possible for an insurance company to survive and thrive by not selling these products, or do you think these products will see a sunset somewhere down the line? Because it's been a decade and the commissions keep on going up. I think IRDA recently removed the commission ceiling as well. It's now as much as you want to give.
So I think the answer to that is that some of the companies will bend their back, create disruptive innovation, and first design a product and then find the distribution. So there's a credit card, for example, which is sold at 1%. There are a lot of financial instruments sold at very small commissions as well. What we need to assure the distributors is that by making these products easier, they'll be able to sell to a lot more. Like bank assurance has been there for 15 years. But if you look at the percentage of customers who have been sold, it's not a great number. I mean, the number of debit card versus number of life insurance policies, you can go to any bank and figure it out. It just doesn't match. So there will be there will be disruptions. There will be some who will believe that yes, they can possibly sell a more customer-centric product at a lower commission and still make more absolute money. And that's where the entire ONDC kind of network will make it very, very transparent and easy for customers to get the right information. Most of the sale that you're talking about is happening because of lack of information, and ONDC is exactly the solution where, or Bima Sugam to that extent, which will make it very, very transparent for customers to make aware and informed choices.
No, thank you everyone. I think in the interest of time, I know some of you have to catch flights and all. We had a great conversation. Just to kind of bringing it all together and summarize, I think there are at least 2-3 key takeaways that we took from it. One, you all highlighted that we are at the right time. The timing is very important, very critical. And Rahul, who is here driving the ONDC work, ONDC has come at the right time, probably. So that is one clearly. Second thing, you all of you agreed and highlighted that a frictionless distribution is a major unlock that will allow to reach to the Bharat, which is also the theme Bharat 2.0 today. And again, that's relevant. The third theme that you all highlighted and shared was the power of collaboration, which came across the conversations. And we have seen what a collaboration can do when the vaccine for COVID came. Typically, a vaccine takes anywhere between 8 to 15 years to really come out. This could be achieved in 12 months. This should not have been possible without the power of collaboration. So what collaboration can do, and I think you all highlighted that. And last but not the least, I think Anuj, you spelled it very well, and you all kind of added to that, is that insurance companies are in some ways looking for opportunities. So this mindset that insurance companies don't want to do this or insurance companies want to avoid this is a myth. Where there is an opportunity, they are going to go for it. And a network like ONDC is just going to make it much more seamless and easier for them. So thank you everyone. Just please give a good round of applause for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our moderator and to all panel members for this wonderful discussion. And felicitate to all the panel members. Can we give them a huge round of applause, everyone? Come in the front. For all the panel discussion. And with this, I, Ansh Chaudhary, signing off. And with that, I want to tell you guys can join in another ballroom for the session, because the session is getting continued over there. With this, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today we'll be seeing a demo of a cascaded transaction in ONDC through the retail and logistics networks. In this transaction, PhonePe is the buy-side app, the seller-side app is coincidentally called Seller app, and the logistics provider is Goodbox. Today we're doing this demo from the customer's perspective on a buy-side app. So let's say that I'm a user and I want some groceries from my local store. So for this, I'll go to the PhonePe buy-side app, which is connected to ONDC. And here I'll go to the search option and search for some chicken using the app. So let's do this. Let's go to the search option. And here I'll search for some chicken. And now let's see the kind of results we get. It's taking a bit to load, but let's wait. Oh, so here we have the results. And so what happened was my search request was sent to an ONDC gateway and broadcast to all seller-side apps in the retail network, which are in my location. And I see chicken items from retailers connected to different seller-side apps. I can choose any chicken item, say in this case from a merchant Chili's connected to ONDC through the seller-side app called Seller App PTE, which also provides free home delivery, by the way. So I choose a few items from this merchant and add them to my cart. After adding these items to my cart, I can see the total for my order. And on the top, you can also see the order has been verified, which means it has been updated in real time with price quote, inventory and offers from the merchant. And since Chili's only accepts cash on delivery for ONDC, so this option has been defaulted. And since I'm happy with this, I'll proceed and send a request to check out and confirm my order. And now the customer won't see this on the buy-side app, but in the background, the following steps take place. The merchant confirms the order on his seller-side app, in this case from Seller App PTE, and I get a confirmation that the order has been placed successfully. Now, as soon as I'd initialized the checkout and confirmation for my order, the seller-side app broadcasts a request for available delivery agents for this order, again through the ONDC network to logistics providers. In this case, Goodbox, a logistics provider, accepts the request for a delivery agent. After my order is confirmed by the merchant, it goes ahead and confirms its order with the logistics provider, in this case Goodbox. And so my order has been confirmed by Goodbox, and I'll wait for Goodbox to assign a delivery agent so that I can start tracking my order. And I will be able to track my order through ONDC. And please note that the buy-side app PhonePe will show the live tracking status of a delivery agent from the logistics provider Goodbox via the seller-side app, in this case the Seller App PTE. So so I can start tracking my order now, and Goodbox picked up my order from the merchant who sent me a notification saying that the order is underway, and now I can see that the Goodbox delivery agent has been assigned and the order has also been dispatched. Wow, so quick. And here on the map, I can see the live location status of the delivery agent, and soon my order will be delivered to me. So that's how we make a transaction using ONDC.